There is a moment late in the second season of Gravity Falls where a yellow triangle with one eye floats above a town he has just turned inside out, laughing the laugh of someone who has been waiting a very long time to be allowed to do this. In that single beat, you realize that the cheerful summer cartoon you started watching, the one about a brother and sister visiting their great uncle in Oregon, was always quietly building toward him. Bill Cipher has been there the entire time. Hidden in the credits, drawn into the wallpaper, baked into the shape of a stone statue in the woods, and almost nobody who watched the first season the first time around noticed how often the show was looking right at him. Tonight we are going to sit with him for a couple of hours, the whole strange shape of his lore, from the dream demon who shook Stanford Pines' hand to the triangle who tried to eat the world. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, we are going to be here a while. And if you have not yet subscribed to Pine Hat, it genuinely does help us keep making these. To understand Bill Cipher at all, you have to understand that the show withheld him on purpose. In the first half of the first season, Gravity Falls looks, on the surface, like a quirky monster of the week mystery comedy. Dipper and Mabel Pines arrive in the small town of Gravity Falls, Oregon, to spend the summer with their great-uncle, Stan Pines, who runs a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack. Dipper finds a leather-bound journal hidden in the woods, the third in a series, marked with a six-fingered hand and the number 3. And the journal slowly teaches him that the town is full of supernatural creatures the rest of the world has forgotten. For 18 episodes, the show plays in that register. There are gnomes, there are merfolk parodies, there is a tooth-obsessed nuisance called the Summerween Trickster, there is a haunted convenience store. Bill Cipher does not appear at all. And yet, if you go back and watch those early episodes with the knowledge of what is coming, you will notice him almost constantly. He is etched into the cover of the journal Dipper carries everywhere. He is in the wallpaper behind Stan. He is in the stained glass window of the secret elevator that has not been revealed yet. He is in the carpet pattern of Ford's hidden study. He is in the symbols around the strange stone circle in the forest. The town is, in a real sense, already his. The show is just waiting for the right moment to let you see him. That moment arrives in the 19th episode of the first season, an episode called Dreamscaperers. The plot, on its surface, is small. Gideon Gleeful, the child psychic villain who has been antagonizing the Pines family all season, wants the deed to the Mystery Shack. He hires a creature from the journal to break into Stan's mind and steal the combination to his safe. The creature he hires is Bill Cipher. Dipper, Mabel, and their friend Soos enter Stan's dreamscape to stop him, and that is where, for the first time on screen, you meet the triangle. He emerges out of darkness in a black and white void, monochrome, with a single eye and a top hat and a bow tie and a stick limb pointing at the world. He tells the kids, in a friendly conversational tone, that he has been watching them for a long time. He calls Dipper Pine Tree and Mabel Shooting Star, names that will only later be revealed as references to the symbols on their clothing and to the prophecy wheel that is also already hidden in the journal. He greets Soos as question mark. He is delighted to be talking to them. He is also openly threatening. And then the episode does something Gravity Falls almost never does. It lets a villain escape with the win not entirely averted. Bill leaves Stan's mind with a parting line about the future and a hint that he can be summoned again. The show, having held him back for nearly an entire season, has now let him into the rest of the story. Nothing in Gravity Falls is ever fully safe from him again. What makes Bill so disquieting in that first appearance is partly the design and partly the voice. The design is the work of the show's creator, Alex Hirsch, who has spoken in interviews about wanting Bill to feel like an Illuminati cartoon that escaped from a conspiracy theorist's notebook and started talking to children. The bow tie and the top hat and the stick limbs are deliberately old-fashioned, almost vaudeville. They evoke a friendly cartoon character from 100 years ago, the kind you might find on the side of a soap advertisement, until you notice that the cartoon has only one eye, and the eye is looking right at you, and it does not blink. The voice is Alex Hirsch's own. He pitches it up, makes it scratchy and high and sing-song, and he gives Bill a laugh that comes from nowhere and goes on too long. The voice was, by Hirsch's own account, modeled in part on his impressions of stand-up comedians and old radio hucksters, the sort of voices that promised you a deal you would later regret. The combination is uncanny. Bill sounds like he is selling you something. He always sounds like he is selling you something. That, the show implies, is what he is. The deeper question, the one the show takes the entire run of the second season to answer, is what exactly Bill Cipher is. The journal calls him a dream demon, a being of pure energy who exists in the mindscape, who can enter dreams and possess bodies, who has lived for what he claims are trillions of years, and who is older, in some sense, than the dimensions themselves. He cannot enter the physical world without an invitation, which is to say, without a deal. He can be summoned through a specific incantation written in symbols. He cannot be killed by ordinary means. He can be lied to, but not outsmarted, or at least, he believes he cannot be outsmarted, which is, in the end, his fatal mistake. The show is careful, especially in the first few appearances, to keep his backstory vague. You learn that he can see the future. You learn that he has been waiting. You learn that he is interested in the Pines family specifically. What you do not learn, until very late, is where he came from, and why he has been so patient. The first hint that there is a history behind Bill, that he is not simply a roaming chaos spirit, but a creature with a personal grievance and a particular plan, comes in the second season. The portal that has been humming in the basement of the Mystery Shack for the entire first season finally activates, and it brings back the man who built it, a six-fingered scientist who looks exactly like Stan but in a long brown coat, with a tuft of gray hair and a pair of glasses that turn the eyes behind them into pinpricks of caution. This is Stanford Pines, the author of the journals, and the great Uncle Dipper has been quoting all summer without knowing it. He is the one who drew Bill into those journal pages. He is the one who, decades earlier, made the deal that let Bill into Gravity Falls in the first place. The show, having spent the first season building up the mystery of the journals and the author, now reveals that the author is also the show's biggest cautionary tale. He trusted Bill. He should not have. The story of how that trust formed and broke is the spine of the second half of the series, and Bill is at the center of it. What Bill seems to want, at first, is simply to keep being summoned, to keep nibbling around the edges of the physical world, to keep collecting deals and possessions and influence. He shakes hands with people in their dreams. The hands burn blue when the deal is sealed. He takes possession of bodies for short periods in exchange for favors. He has fun in those bodies, often violently, often disturbingly, because the show is willing to let Bill be properly menacing under the cover of cartoon timing. In one notorious scene, he possesses Dipper, a 12-year-old boy, and uses Dipper's own hands to slam Dipper's body into walls, smash his fingers in a drawer, throw himself downstairs, and generally do everything a child in his right mind would absolutely refuse to do, because Bill, having borrowed the body, considers it a rental car he does not have to bring back in one piece. The show plays this for jokes, and the jokes work, but if you watch them as an adult, you notice how genuinely upsetting the implications are. Bill regards bodies, including the bodies of children, as costumes. He regards a town as a snack. He regards the universe, eventually, as a meal. The first time the show really lets you understand the scale of what Bill wants, as opposed to the scale of what he does on any given day, comes in the second season episode in which Ford finally sits down and tells Dipper the truth about the journals. He explains that he came to Gravity Falls decades earlier because he was a brilliant young scientist who could never quite find his place in the academic world. He had a sixth finger on each hand, which the show frames partly as a personal anomaly and partly as a quiet signal that he was always slightly outside the human norm. He came to Gravity Falls because the town itself was a hotspot of anomalous activity. He could feel the strangeness in the woods, and while he was in those woods, alone and ambitious and a little desperate to prove himself, a triangular voice in the back of his mind offered him a partnership. Bill called himself a muse. He claimed to grant inspiration to one worthy individual per century. He told Ford that Ford was the chosen one. He gave Ford the secrets of dimensional physics. He guided Ford toward the construction of a portal that would, in theory, allow the two of them to communicate freely between worlds. Ford trusted him. Ford built the machine. And only at the very end of that process, in the company of his old college friend Fiddleford McGucket, did Ford realize that the portal was not a doorway for sharing scientific knowledge. It was a doorway for Bill, and the creatures behind Bill, to enter the physical world and consume it. The show portrays Ford's realization as a kind of slow horror. Fiddleford uses an early version of a memory-erasing machine on himself to try to forget the trauma of what he glimpsed through the portal. Ford, alone and now afraid, hides his journals across the town and writes warnings in their pages, warnings that Dipper will spend a whole summer reading without understanding. Ford reaches out for help to the only person he can think of, the brother he had not spoken to in years, Stan. And Stan, who came to the Mystery Shack expecting a reconciliation, Instead, finds a brother who needs him to take responsibility for keeping a dangerous machine safe. The fight between them, the moment where Stan accidentally pushes Ford through the portal and into the dimensional space behind it, is the cold heart of the show, in that the entire 40-episode run is a slow unwinding of what that single push set in motion. And the creature that pushed Ford toward the portal in the first place, the Muse who whispered in his ear and called him the Chosen One, and let him believe the project was his own idea, was Bill. He is the original betrayal under the original wound that the entire summer is trying to heal. What this means for the lore is enormous. Bill is not, in the show's framing, an opportunist who happened to find the Pines family because they happened to live in the wrong town. He chose this family. He chose Ford. He spent years grooming Ford the way a charming cult leader grooms a recruit, telling him he was special, telling him he was misunderstood, telling him only Bill truly saw him. He did this because the portal Bill needed could only be built by a mind of a very specific kind, and Ford's mind was that kind. And once the portal was built, the rest of the long arc, the journals, the mystery shack, the wait for the right alignment of cosmic conditions, the slow ripening of a tear in the fabric of reality, was a project Bill had already invested decades in. He could afford to wait through Dipper and Mabel's first summer. He had already waited longer than human civilization. He had, by his own account, lived through the heat death of universes. A single Oregon summer was nothing to him. The show wants you to feel that scale. It wants Bill to feel cosmic, not just spooky. And yet, because Gravity Falls is the kind of show it is, it also wants Bill to be a comedian. That is part of what makes the writing of him so striking. He is a creature on the scale of a Lovecraftian elder god, capable of speaking in the language of cosmic horror, and he chooses, almost always, to deliver his lines as one-liners. He cracks jokes about reality. He greets every horror with a kind of giddy delight. He makes puns. He treats genocide as a punchline. The combination of cosmic and clownish is, in a real way, the engine of his menace. It is harder to be scared of an eldritch horror that solemnly intones doom. It is much easier to be scared of one that finds the whole thing funny. The show implies that Bill's amusement is itself a sign of how alien he is. He has lived too long and seen too much for ordinary human cruelty to register on him as anything but a small, bright spark. He laughs because nothing he sees can wound him, and he laughs more whenever he notices that someone watching can be wounded. There is a stretch in the front half of the second season that the show uses, in a quiet way, to build out Bill's broader mythology. In an episode called Society of the Blind Eye, you discover that there is a hidden organization in Gravity Falls dedicated to erasing the memories of anyone who learns too much about the town. The society is the legacy of Fiddleford McGucket, who, after he saw what was on the other side of the portal, could not handle the knowledge and built a machine to forget. Other townspeople, having seen their own strange things, joined him. The society is presented as misguided, even villainous, but it is also a quiet acknowledgement that knowing about creatures like Bill is itself a form of damage. The show implies that the existence of Bill is so destabilizing to a normal mind that an entire institution had to be invented just to deal with the fallout of accidental glimpses of him. He is the kind of being that, in a more literal piece of cosmic horror, would drive his witnesses mad. In Gravity Falls, he settles for traumatizing them in a way that can be undone with a complicated lever. By the time you reach the back half of the second season, Bill has shifted from a recurring threat to a countdown. The show begins to seed signs that he is preparing for something larger. The episode A Tale of Two Stans, which lays out Ford and Stan's shared history in full, is the moment where you understand that Bill's project in Gravity Falls is not random mischief, but the slow assembly of conditions for what the show eventually names Weirdmageddon. Weirdmageddon is the apocalypse Bill has been waiting for. It is the moment when the rift between dimensions, the one Ford's portal accidentally opened, is wide enough and stable enough that Bill can step through into the physical world in his full form and begin to rewrite reality according to his preferences. The Pines family unknowingly carry that rift around with them, in a snow globe-shaped containment field that Mabel ends up carrying in her backpack. She trusts the wrong person with it. The rift breaks. Bill arrives. The arrival of Weirdmageddon is, by some distance, the most cinematic stretch of the show. It begins in the episode Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, where the rift cracks open above the mystery shack and the color of the world starts to bleed out at the edges. Bill emerges from a triangular tear in the heavens, and looks down at the town like a man finally allowed to step into a restaurant he has been smelling from outside for years. He calls his friends through. The hench maniacs, a small parade of dream creatures and fragments of monsters, arrive at his side. He turns the sheriff into a stone seat. He turns a deputy into a streamer. He turns the laws of physics into suggestions. The sky becomes a kaleidoscope. Time stops working in a fixed direction. He builds, on the ruined sky above Gravity Falls, a structure that fans came to call the pyramid, a triangular pyramid with one eye, in which he holds court while the world melts. The show does not flinch from this. It is, in tone, the most apocalyptic content Disney had aired in a long time. It is also, somehow, still funny, because Bill cannot help himself. Even at the height of his triumph, he is making jokes, twisting reality into puns, sentencing extras to ironic punishments. What is striking, even at the height of Weirdmageddon, is that Bill cannot leave Gravity Falls. There is a barrier around the town that prevents his reality bending from spilling outward into the rest of the world. The show explains this briefly through Ford, who notes that the very specific dimensional structure of Gravity Falls, the unique geography that made it a center for anomalies in the first place, is also what is keeping Bill caged. He has finally got into the physical world, but he has stepped into a snow globe. The cage is, in a sense, the entire show. The premise of Gravity Falls, that there is something deeply strange about this one Oregon town, becomes the explanation for why the apocalypse stays small enough for two children to fix. Bill has chosen this town, has groomed Ford for decades to open it, has waited patiently for the right summer, and the prize he gets at the end of all that planning is one valley. He is, the show implies, enormous, and the world's defense against him is enormous in a different way, in that the rules of his prison are baked into the geography itself. The way Bill is defeated in the final episodes of the show is one of the most quietly devastating things the series does. It is also one of the cleverest. The end of Weirdmageddon, the moment that the show has been building toward for 2 seasons, is not a fight. It is a con. Stan, the great uncle who has spent the entire series pretending to be his more famous brother, agrees to a final swap. He puts on Ford's clothes and his glasses and walks into the pyramid to bargain with Bill. He offers Bill what Bill needs, an invitation into the only mind in town strong enough to let him out of the barrier. Bill, who has spent decades grooming Stan's brother Ford for exactly this kind of access, sees what he thinks is Ford agreeing to be possessed. He flows into the body, and the moment he is inside, Ford fires a memory-erasing gun directly at the mind he is in, knowing that wiping Stan's mind will also destroy Bill where he stands. Because a being made of mind, trapped in a mind, has no other layer to retreat to. Stan loses everything he is. He forgets his name, his brother, his great-niece and nephew, his town, his whole life. Bill, having been tricked into the wrong skull, dies inside that skull. The show, just before he disappears, lets you hear him scream in panicked recognition that he has been outwitted by a man he considered too crude to bother lying to. That moment, the moment of Bill's death, is layered with so much that it is worth lingering on. It is, on one level, exactly the kind of triumph the show has been building toward, the small, clever family beating the cosmic chaos. It is, on another level, a tragedy. Stan, the character the show has spent 40 episodes teaching you to love, has just deleted himself. Mabel sits in front of her great-uncle who does not know her anymore, holds up a scrapbook, and walks him gently back through his own life until something inside him remembers. The reconstruction of Stan's mind through the persistent love of his family is, in a sense, the show's final argument against everything Bill is. Bill is a creature of solitary cosmic perception. He has no family. He has, by his own account, no equals. He is alone in the universe and finds it amusing. The Pines family is everything he is not. They are messy and contingent and ordinary, and they remember each other when no one else will. That is what kills him. But the show also leaves a lot of doors open. Bill's death is staged but not explained in detail. There are several frames in the climactic sequence where, if you slow them down, you can see images that fans have argued over for years. A frequently discussed moment shows Bill, just before he is erased, attempting to speak a message in an unfamiliar language, which has been read variously as a final curse, a final plea to a higher being he has been keeping at bay, or a clue toward his own future return. The show was clearly happy to plant ambiguity at that exact point. It also lets the closing sequence of the season include a hidden message, written in the cryptography the show is known for, that fans decoded soon after airing. As far as fans have pieced together, and as Hirsch has discussed in interviews, the decoded message can be read as a kind of summoning. The implication, which the official material has played with carefully ever since, is that Bill is not necessarily as gone as the on-screen action suggests, that something of him persists, and that the show was leaving room for him to return in a form the series itself was not going to show. To understand why fans have spent the years since the finale picking apart that scene, you have to spend some time inside the cryptography of Gravity Falls itself, because Bill is not only a character in the show, he is also a kind of running puzzle. The series was built from very early on, with hidden messages encoded in nearly every episode. The end credits of each episode contain a string of symbols that, when decoded with a simple letter shift cipher, reveal a hidden line of text. Different stretches of the show use different ciphers. The first season uses a Caesar cipher with a shift of 3, in which each letter in the encoded text is moved 3 places along the alphabet. Once viewers caught on to that, the show switched to an @bash cipher, in which the alphabet is reversed so that A becomes Z and B becomes Y. When that too was solved quickly, the show moved to a simple substitution where each letter is replaced by its number in the alphabet. Later episodes use more complicated combinations, including Vigenère ciphers with keywords drawn from inside the episode itself. And Bill, almost without exception, sits at the center of these puzzles. His own name is, of course, a clue. Cipher means a code, but it also means a zero, an empty place, a hidden quantity. A cipher can also mean a person who is hollow inside, used by other people for their purposes. The show is implying, through the name alone, all 3 meanings at once. He is a code. He is a void. He is, for those who deal with him, the empty space at the center of their own decisions, the place where they used to have judgment before he persuaded them to outsource it to him. The first name, Bill, is more disarming, the most ordinary name in English, the kind of name you would give to a friendly accountant. The contrast is deliberate. It is one more example of the show's habit of dressing up cosmic horror in a costume that is friendly enough to keep on a children's network. The character Alex Hirsch designed is a code, wearing the name of a man. The codes around Bill are everywhere once you start looking. The journal cover itself is, in a sense, a cipher. The 6-fingered hand stands for Ford. The number 3 stands for the 3rd volume. The triangle below them, the shape that has been on every journal cover since the first frame of the show, is Bill, but you only realize that after the reveal in the 2nd season. Even the wallpaper of the Mystery Shack contains hidden triangles in its pattern, a small detail that the production design team buried in the show in the 1st season and that fans pored over in the 2nd. The triangle is everywhere because the show wants you to understand, retroactively, that Bill has been a presence the entire time. He is not introduced in the 19th episode, he is only acknowledged in the 19th episode. The earlier episodes are filled with his fingerprints. He is, in this sense, less a character than a watermark, present on every page of the story, only visible to those who already know what to look for. The cryptography extends beyond the credits and the wallpaper into the merchandise itself. The actual production team released a book, designed to look like one of Ford's journals, in which the in-universe text is filled with ciphers that decode into further hidden lore. There are pages dedicated to Bill in that book, written from Ford's perspective, that describe him in language Ford could only have used after the betrayal. They describe Bill as a being with no friends, only useful idiots. They describe him as the most cunning trickster Ford has ever encountered. They describe him as the reason Ford has not slept properly in years. The journals expand the show's lore in directions the episodes themselves did not have time for, and they do so partly in plain text and partly in code, so that any reader who wants the full picture has to do the work themselves. Bill, even outside the show, makes you decode him in order to understand him. There is a particular pleasure, the kind that suits sleepy late-night viewing, in the way the show layers these puzzles. Take the prophecy wheel. Inside the 2nd journal, a diagram appears showing 10 symbols arranged in a circle, with a small triangle in the center. Each symbol is a slightly stylized version of something carried by, or worn by, one of the show's main characters. The pine tree is Dipper, named for the pine tree on his hat. The shooting star is Mabel, named for the shooting star on her favorite sweater. The question mark is Soos, named for the question mark on his shirt. The ice bag is Wendy, the laid-back teenage employee of the Mystery Shack. The 6-fingered hand is Ford. The llama is Pacifica. The pentagram is Gideon, The crescent is Stan, drawn from the shape on his fez. The stitched heart is Robbie, one of the older teenagers in town. The pair of glasses belongs to McGucket. The Pines family and their closest allies form a kind of zodiac around Bill, and the implication is that, brought together in the right configuration, those 10 symbols can banish him. The show plays out a version of that idea in the finale, where the characters do briefly join hands in the order suggested by the wheel, only for the formation to fall apart at the last moment when an old grudge between two of them flares up at exactly the wrong time. Bill survives that particular trap, only to walk into the deeper one with Stan. The show is, in this moment, doing two things at once. It is fulfilling the prophecy as a near miss, and it is teaching you that the prophecy was always a misdirect, that the real weapon against Bill is not a magic circle of symbols, but a family bond strong enough to survive his manipulation. The wheel is, in retrospect, the same as the journals. It is half clue and half decoy. That doubling, the sense that everything Bill touches contains both an answer and a trap, runs all the way through his backstory as the show and its expanded material have explained it. In the original run of the series, you learn relatively little about where Bill comes from. You know that he is a being from a place beyond ordinary dimensions. You know that he is older than the universe in some sense. You know that he has spent time in the minds of important historical figures, because the show implies, in a few quietly chilling lines, that some of the most influential turns in human history were nudged by his suggestions. The Egyptian pyramids, by most accounts, are connected to him in the show's universe. There is a brief scene in the second season where a stone carving is unearthed in a pyramid, and the carving is unmistakably a triangle with one eye, surrounded by hieroglyphs. The implication is that Bill has been worshipped before, in cultures across human history, and that the iconography around eyes and triangles that runs through human civilization is, in the show's universe, a record of his slow attempts to be invited back in. The eye on the back of a piece of currency, in this reading, is not just a borrowed Masonic symbol, it is a remembered face. The expanded material that has come out since the show's finale has filled in many of the blanks the series itself left open about Bill's origin. In particular, a tie-in book published in 2024, presented in the voice of Bill himself, gives an account of his home dimension that the show only gestured at. According to that book, Bill is from a flat two-dimensional world, a universe of lines and shapes with no depth, and in his telling, that world was, at some point, ended by him. The book describes him as having grown up in a small triangular family, in a society of two-dimensional shapes who could not perceive a third axis. He, by some accident of mind, began to perceive it. He glimpsed up and out into the third dimension, into our space, and his fellow two-dimensional beings could not comprehend what he was seeing. The book frames the resulting break as a kind of catastrophe in his home reality, a moment where Bill, having seen something the other shapes could not understand, became, in their eyes, monstrous. They tried to stop him. He, having access to a dimension they could not perceive, made himself bigger than their entire reality. The home dimension burned. He emerged from the wreckage as the creature you know from the show. Whether this account is the full truth or itself a Bill-style story, designed to make himself sympathetic, is a question the book deliberately leaves unresolved. The character of Bill is, after all, a creature whose autobiography is unlikely to be honest. What that backstory adds, taken at face value, is a particular flavor of tragedy to the menace. Bill, in this telling, is not simply an evil triangle. He is a being whose first act of perception was a transgression against the limits of his own world. He saw too much and could not unsee it. He became, in the eyes of the people who loved him, a monster. He left or destroyed his home rather than live within its constraints. By the time he reaches Gravity Falls, he is doing the same thing to humanity, the same offer to one specific human that he once made to himself. He wants to introduce a small parochial world to a much larger reality. He wants to be the muse who explains the higher dimensions. The fact that almost everyone he touches in this process either goes mad or is destroyed is, in his telling, not a sign of his malice. It is, he would argue, the cost of doing business with the truth. The show, of course, does not believe him. It frames every one of his pitches as a manipulation. But it does leave you with the question, particularly when you think about Ford, of how much of Bill's seduction worked because his pitch was, at some level, true. The universe really is bigger than ordinary human perception allows. There really are dimensions of physics that the human mind is not equipped to handle. Bill's lies were always tangled with truths. That is part of why they were so hard to refuse. The set of creatures Bill brings with him during Weirdmageddon, the so-called henchmaniacs, are presented in the show as a kind of grim parody of the prophecy wheel. They are 10 in number, like the zodiac figures around Bill in the journal. But where the zodiac figures are an alliance of the show's heroes, the henchmaniacs are a coalition of nightmares Bill has accumulated over what the show implies are millennia of being in the mindscape. They are not individually particularly powerful. They are more like grotesque hangers-on, drawn to Bill the way courtiers are drawn to a king who has plenty to share. Their names, as the show gives them, are at once silly and deeply wrong. There is a many-eyed brute. There is a diamond-shaped figure with horns. There is an articulated arm with a mouth at the end of it. There is a hexagon in a top hat. There is a blob with a single eye. There is a flaming pink woman. There is a row of disembodied teeth that hops along the ground. There is a creature shaped like a keyhole, an idea more than a body. Each of them, in design, looks like an off-model child's drawing of a monster, which is precisely what makes them disturbing in motion. They are simple enough that the eye reads them as cartoon, complicated enough that the mind cannot quite parse them, and consistent enough across appearances that it becomes clear they exist as a stable troop with a stable hierarchy. Bill is their boss. They follow him because, the show implies, he can give them the kind of indulgence that they were created to enjoy. They are not, individually, equipped to invade a town. Behind Bill, in the right conditions, they are. The way the show uses these creatures is, in narrative terms, very clever. Each of them gets a small moment of menace, a small joke, a small piece of business, and then recedes. They are not characters in the sense of having arcs. They are extensions of Bill's personality, expressions of different flavors of his appetite. The flame woman is the flirtatious cruelty. The brute is the literal violence. The teeth are the literal hunger. The keyhole is the implication of being able to access anything. They are a court, in the proper sense, the visible symptoms of Bill's reach. None of them survives the finale in any meaningful way. The barrier around Gravity Falls bursts when Bill dies, and the creatures, deprived of their host, dissolve back into whatever raw mind stuff they were drawn from. The show does not linger on their endings. They are punctuation, not characters. Their job is to make Bill look like an army, not to be one in their own right. It is worth pausing on what Bill himself looks like, in detail, because the design of him does so much of the writing. He is a triangle in his ordinary form, slightly taller than a person, bright yellow, with a single thick black eye in the center of his body. He has a small top hat, balanced on the upper point of his triangle. He has a black bow tie at his lower point. He has 2 stick-like arms in white gloves and 2 stick-like legs in matching dress shoes. His pupil is a single dot, set in a yellow iris, and when he is amused, his eye narrows into something close to a friendly squint, and when he is angry, his eye widens until the pupil is almost lost. He glows from within, a permanent light source, and the color of his glow shifts depending on his mood. When he is calm, he is a steady yellow. When he is furious, he turns red. When he makes a deal, his hand flares with a blue flame. When he is rendered in his black and white mindscape form, the color drains, but the eye stays vivid. The design is, in conscious imitation of older pop art and stage illustration, almost cozy. He has none of the obvious markers of a horror creature. He has no teeth, no claws, no rotting flesh. He has, in the simplest possible vocabulary, a shape, an eye, and a hat. That is all the show needs. It makes him terrifying anyway. The reason the design works as well as it does is the consistency with which the show treats it as a serious thing. Bill is, formally, a cartoon. He has a cartoon's body. He moves with cartoon physics, hovering, bouncing, stretching. He has cartoon expressions. The show, having committed to a creature who looks like an old company mascot, refuses to soften that contrast. He kills with a cartoon's body. He laughs at funerals with a cartoon's voice. He celebrates his arrival in the physical world by turning humans into chairs while still looking, in every frame, like he could be on the side of a vintage cereal box. The horror is in the joining of those two ideas. He is funny, and he is doing something monstrous, and he sees no contradiction. Children watching the show in the mid-2010s got, in Bill, an introduction to a particular kind of tonal horror that older audiences only usually meet later in life. Adult viewers, returning to the show, often describe Bill as one of the most genuinely disturbing villains in any animated work of the past decade. The reason is that he is allowed, on screen, to enjoy himself completely. His enjoyment of himself is, in many ways, what the show treats as his moral signature. There are villains who are coldly indifferent to suffering, villains who are wounded and lash out, villains who are deluded and believe they are doing good. Bill is none of these. Bill is delighted by suffering, but more than that, he is delighted by surprise. He is, on a fundamental level, a creature who has lived too long and gets bored easily. His amusement comes not from the pain of the people around him, but from the unexpected turns of any given scene. He likes it when humans do things he did not predict. He likes it when their cleverness gets them somewhere new. He even, in a strange way, respects Stan at the end, because Stan does something Bill did not see coming. The show implies, in his final scream, that the surprise is, for Bill, the worst possible injury. He could survive being defeated. What he cannot survive is being outwitted. He has spent his existence as the most cunning creature in any room he enters. To die at the hands of a con man who he wrote off as too crude to be a threat is, for him, a kind of cosmic embarrassment. The show grants him no dignity in those final frames. He flickers, he stretches, he pleads. He tries to bargain and finds himself, for the first time in his career, in a mind that has been deliberately emptied of anything he can bargain with. The question of who Bill might have been calling for at the very end is one of the largest unresolved puzzles in the show's expanded mythology. Inside the journals and within the wider fan understanding of the series, there is a being referred to as the Axolotl, a higher entity who exists at a level above Bill in the cosmic order. The Axolotl is mentioned only in fragments. The most quoted reference comes from one of the encoded messages hidden in the show's official material, in which Bill, in his final moments, speaks a backwards incantation that, by most accounts, decodes as a plea to the Axolotl for a chance to return in a different form. The incantation appears in the show's official material and has been discussed in subsequent interviews. The Axolotl, however, does not appear directly in the main series. The being is described as ancient, of an order higher than Bill, and capable of granting deals to creatures who, like Bill, have run out of other options. The implication is that Bill, who has spent his existence offering deals to others, ends the series by trying to make one himself, with a higher power he had presumably been managing to avoid for most of his career. Whether that deal was granted, or whether the Axolotl simply listened and did nothing, is one of the open questions the show leaves you with. The expanded material has played with the possibility that some fragment of Bill persists, somewhere in the dimensional space between worlds, in a form that is no longer the triangle you saw on screen, waiting. The series itself does not confirm this. It only leaves the door slightly ajar. If you want to understand how Bill works on a tactical level, the place to start is the way he handles a deal. The mechanics, as the show presents them, are simple enough to remember and complicated enough to lose track of when you are inside one. A person makes a wish, usually a small one, usually in a moment of frustration or desperation. Bill, who has been listening from the mindscape, offers a trade. He will provide what the wisher wants, and in return he asks for something the wisher considers worthless. Access to a body for a few minutes, a small object, permission to do a single specific thing. The wisher, focused on the gain, almost never looks closely at the cost. They shake his hand catches fire in a clean blue flame, and the deal is sealed. And then, because Bill is Bill, the cost reveals itself to be much higher than the wisher imagined, and the gain reveals itself to be more constrained than they had hoped. He is, in this sense, a fairly traditional kind of trickster figure, in the tradition of folktale demons who give you exactly what you asked for and not what you wanted. He is also, more disturbingly, a being who almost never breaks the literal terms of a deal. He keeps his word with terrifying precision. The horror is in the small print, which the wisher did not read, and which Bill knew they would not read, and which he wrote in the most specific way possible, because he is, in part, a craftsman of language. The most famous deal in the show, the one that drives the entire plot, is, as already laid out, Ford's. He shakes Bill's hand in a flashback that the show finally allows itself to show in the second season. The flashback takes place in the hidden study under the Mystery Shack, before the shack was there, when the building was just a half-built laboratory. Ford, alone and exhausted, is offered the architecture of a portal capable of connecting dimensions. He takes the deal. He does not ask what Bill wants out of the arrangement. He assumes Bill, being a Muse, is interested in the work for its own sake. He is wrong. Bill, having engineered Ford's research toward the construction of the portal, intends to use the portal to walk into the physical world and stay. Ford realizes this much too late, after a series of small clues that he had ignored because Bill was so charming about each of them. The episode that lays out this betrayal is, in tonal terms, one of the most adult stretches of the show. It is a story about a brilliant person who has been manipulated by someone who loved him without limit. The fact that the manipulator was a glowing triangle does not change the shape of the wound. Ford spends the rest of the series carrying that wound. He sleeps in shifts. By most accounts, the show implies that he wears a metal plate inside his head to prevent further intrusion. He has a horror of mirrors, of his own dreams, of anything that resembles a one-eyed shape. He has a particular shudder, almost involuntary, whenever Bill's name is spoken aloud, even by someone he trusts. The show treats Ford's relationship with Bill as the trauma of an abusive partnership, with all the textures that implies. He is not just a man who made a bad bet. He is a man who was loved by, and gave love to, a thing that was studying him the whole time. That is, the show implies, the deepest kind of betrayal, and it is one the character of Ford is not sure he can ever fully recover from. The deal Ford makes is the master template. The other deals in the show repeat its structure on smaller scales. Gideon, the child psychic of the first season, makes a deal with Bill in which he gives Bill permission to enter Stan's mind in exchange for help getting the deed to the Mystery Shack. The deal goes badly for Gideon for the obvious reason that he has invited a creature into his life that, having got what it wants, has no further use for him. The deal with Dipper in the second season is a much smaller thing on the surface, an exchange in which Dipper, frustrated by his inability to find a password on Ford's laptop, agrees to give Bill the use of his body for what Bill calls just a moment. The moment becomes most of an episode. Bill, in Dipper's body, does what Bill always does, which is to abuse the rental. He treats the body as a stranger's car, hurling it around, slamming its fingers into surfaces, mocking the boy whose limbs he is using. The episode, which is called Sock Opera, plays much of this for visual comedy. The voice work, by Alex Hirsch over what would otherwise be Dipper's lines, sells the wrongness. The closing of that episode, when Mabel and her friends manage to get Bill out of Dipper's body, and Dipper looks down at the bruises he did not put on himself, is one of the genuinely upsetting moments in the show. Dipper does not really talk about it afterwards. He just looks at his hands for a long second. The show does not need to underline what has happened. He has been wounded. The thing that wounded him is still out there. A pattern emerges, the more deals you look at. Bill prefers to deal with people who are alone, who are hungry, who are convinced that their own talents are not adequately recognized, and who would, if asked outright, refuse to compromise themselves. He approaches them obliquely, often through a flatter form of his offering. He never asks them, on the first meeting, for the thing he most wants. He asks them for something small. He asks them for something small. He asks them for something small. He returns later, having already established the precedent of the relationship, to ask for something larger. He repeats this process for years if necessary, the show implies, in Ford's case for at least a couple of decades. By the time he is asking for the keys to a portal that will swallow the world, he is asking it of someone who has already given him so much that to refuse the request feels, to the wisher, like an inconsistency in their own character. This is the part of his method that is most disturbing to think about at length. He is not a creature who relies on the moment of weakness. He relies on a long, slow weakening, a relationship he has carefully built and that the human believes is mutual. The deal is just the moment the trap snaps shut on a foot that has, in fact, been inside the trap for years. What the show does very well, in the long run up to the finale, is reverse engineer this pattern in the eyes of the characters who have been hurt by it. Ford, by the end of the series, is an expert in Bill's method because he is, in essence, a former victim turned student. He knows what the pitch sounds like. He knows the timing of the small ask before the large one. He knows the warmth, the apparent personal attention, the assurance that the wisher is the special one, the muse who has been waiting just for them. He knows, because Bill said all of those things to him, and he believed them. By the second half of the second season, when Ford is moving through the town trying to prepare it for what is coming, he is also moving with the slightly stiff caution of a person who has been burnt and is determined not to be burnt again. The show frames this beautifully. Ford is brilliant, and he is also a little broken, and the brokenness is what makes his brilliance survive. He is the person who knows Bill's tricks because he has been every one of them. He is, the show implies, the only human capable of designing the plan that brings Bill down, precisely because he is the human who has spent the longest looking the creature in the eye. The plan to bring Bill down, when it finally takes shape, is the work of several episodes and several false starts. The first plan is the Zodiac. Ford gathers the 10 people whose symbols appear on the prophecy wheel and instructs them to join hands in a particular configuration. The show treats this with appropriate reverence. The camera tilts up, the music swells, the hands almost touch, and then a personal argument between two of the participants, an argument the show has been seeding for episodes, breaks the chain at the worst possible moment. The circle fails. Ford is captured by Bill almost immediately afterwards. Bill, having spent the whole season studying the prophecy and looking for ways to neutralize it, watches the failure of the circle with the calm of a man who knew it could not possibly work. He always knew. He has, the show implies, been on the planet long enough to have seen prophecies fail before, often. He understood the human variable. He just had to wait for it to express itself. What Bill does not anticipate, because nothing in his playbook accounts for it, is the second plan. The second plan, which Ford and Stan put together over the course of a single quiet conversation, is the kind of plan you would never publish in a journal because it is built entirely out of the relationship the two of them share. It depends on Bill mistaking one for the other. It depends on Stan being willing to lose his mind for his brother. It depends on Ford being willing to ask his brother to lose it, after a lifetime of not asking him for anything. The show stages this in a small room, with the two of them facing each other, talking quietly. There are no dramatic chords. There is no big speech. Stan says yes the way an older brother always says yes, half irritated, half loving, and then they walk into the trap, and Bill, watching the man he thinks is Ford agreeing to be possessed, feels the small thrill of victory he has been waiting decades for. He does not look closely enough. He never looks closely enough at humans because, in his understanding, they are not worth looking at closely. He flows into the body. The body's owner pulls the trigger on the memory gun. The trick works. Bill dies. The show could not be clearer that the thing that defeats him is not power, not strategy, not magic. It is the willingness of two old men to be vulnerable with each other for 30 seconds in a forest. Bill, who has lived for trillions of years by his own claim, has never seen that move. He cannot understand it. It kills him. There is a particular line of analysis among fans of the show that holds that Bill is, in essence, a character who cannot understand love. Not because he has no feelings, but because his feelings are not the same shape as human feelings. He has hunger, he has amusement, he has, perhaps, a kind of pride. He has loneliness, which the expanded material insists on in the same way certain solitary predators have it. But love, in the specific sense the show treats it, is a thing that requires another being to be more important than yourself, and Bill cannot be persuaded that anything is more important than himself. He cannot, on a structural level, conceive of Stan agreeing to be erased for Ford. He can conceive of betrayal, of self-interest, of cleverness. He cannot conceive of self-sacrifice. That gap is the actual hole in his armor. The Pines family fills it with their own bodies. He dies because he cannot imagine a hand willingly empty. It is, in a sense, the gentlest possible moral the show could give a children's animation, and the harshest thing it could say about a being who has spent his existence treating other beings as resources. After the finale, the show treats Bill's death as final on the level of the main narrative. The next time you see Gravity Falls on screen, the rift is gone, the town has been restored, the henchmaniacs are gone, and Bill, in his original form, is nowhere. The town remembers him only as a strange episode in a strange summer. The Pines family carries him as a weight that the show implies will follow them through all of their adult lives. Stan and Ford, having reconciled, plan to leave Gravity Falls together on a long sea voyage. A journey to chart the world's anomalies in the way Ford has always wanted to. Dipper and Mabel turn 13 during the events of the finale, and the show, with great care, leaves them at the edge of childhood, knowing that whatever the summer was, it cannot be repeated. The closing montage of the series is unhurried, intimate, and emotionally devastating. Bill is not in any of those frames. He is, the show implies, no longer in the world. And yet, the final image of the series, the one shown after the credits of the final episode, is a flash of a stone statue half buried in the earth of a forest in Gravity Falls. The statue is unmistakably Bill in his triangular form, with his single eye, his top hat, his bow tie, his one outstretched stick-like arm, his hand frozen mid-offer for a deal. The implication, which the show does not elaborate on but which it absolutely intends, is that some part of Bill has survived his erasure, that he has been petrified rather than annihilated, that his consciousness or some fragment of it has been compressed into this object, and that the deal he is offering is still on the table for anyone who walks past and is willing to put their hand into his. The show ends on that image. The credits roll, the world goes quiet. The triangle, in the forest, waits. That single shot, more than any other piece of material the show released, became the engine of the cultural afterlife of Gravity Falls. Within hours of the finale's broadcast in early 2016, fans had begun to argue about whether the statue was metaphorical, prophetic, or literal. The show's creator did not, at first, comment on it. The official line was that the show was complete and that the statue was an image, not a teaser. But the image itself had a momentum that the show could not control. It looked too specific, too physical, too placed. Fans wanted to know if there was a real statue, in a real forest, somewhere in the real world, that the production team had placed there. It turned out that the answer was yes. In the summer of 2016, the creator of Gravity Falls, Alex Hirsch, launched a real-world treasure hunt that he called the Cipher Hunt. The hunt unfolded on social media, with Hirsch posting cryptic clues that, when decoded, pointed to a sequence of locations around the world. Each location contained the next clue. The hunt drew thousands of fans into participation, who traveled to the indicated cities and parks and historic sites, decoded the symbols left there, and posted updates online. The trail began far overseas before crossing the United States, and eventually, in the final clue, led to a remote stretch of forest near Reedsport, Oregon, where a real statue of Bill Cipher had been hidden among the trees. The statue, when found by a group of fans, was a one-of-one model built out of weatherproof material, handcrafted by an artist working with the production team, and placed in the woods specifically for this hunt. The fans who found it photographed it, decoded the additional ciphers on its base, and the show declared the hunt complete. The statue itself was, in the days that followed, reportedly moved by local authorities into a public park nearby, and accounts of its current condition have circulated for years afterwards. The Cipher Hunt was, in effect, the show extending its mythology into the physical world, and Bill, in being the statue at the center of it, became one of the only animated characters in modern television to have a documented physical presence outside the screen. The image is striking either way. There is, somewhere in Oregon, a triangle with one eye and a hand outstretched, offering a deal to whoever finds it. The show would not, of course, encourage anyone to take that deal, but the option, as a thought experiment, is there. It is worth slowing down and walking through Weirdmageddon properly, because, as the longest sustained sequence the show ever gives to Bill in action, it is also the clearest portrait of who he is when nothing is restraining him. The arc is split across 3 episodes that aired in late 2015 and early 2016, titled in order Weirdmageddon Part 1, Weirdmageddon Part 2, Escape from Reality, and Weirdmageddon Part 3, Take Back the Falls. Each of the first 2 runs roughly the length of a standard episode, and the third was extended to fill what was essentially a feature-length conclusion to the series. Together they make up what fans tend to refer to simply as the finale, and they cover everything from the first opening of the rift to the funeral of summer that follows the defeat. Bill is present in nearly every scene. The rift opens at the very end of the previous episode. Mabel, in a moment of vulnerability, has been given the rift by Dipper for safekeeping, has carried it in a backpack, and has been tricked by an apparently kind stranger into handing it over. The stranger is Blendon Blandon, a time traveler from the future who has spent multiple appearances in the show being a comic figure of frustration, and who has now, after years of accumulated grievance against Dipper, sided briefly with Bill. He cracks the rift. The rift explodes upward into the sky above the Mystery Shack. The first color that bleeds out of it is the green of Bill's preferred decorative palette, then yellow, then a kind of negative of those colors, like a Polaroid being slowly burnt. The sky cracks open. Bill emerges through it. He is, in this first appearance, the size of a building, his shape filling a meaningful portion of the horizon, and he stretches as he steps out into reality, the way a man stretches after a long flight. The show gives him a line, in this moment, in which he announces, in essence, that the long wait is finally over. The line is delivered with the cheerful tone of someone who has been dreaming of this scene for so long that the dream is louder, in his head, than the reality of it. He is, in his first seconds of physical existence, almost overwhelmed by his own arrival. He shakes off the disorientation. He gets to work. Bill's first acts in the physical world are, deliberately, small and personal. He turns the sheriff of the town into a stone block. He turns the sheriff's deputy into a streamer of bunting. He turns a passing reporter into a wax effigy. The early minutes of the apocalypse are not, in the show, a vast cosmic spectacle. They are a series of cartoonish punishments, each delivered with a flicker of his hand, on individual townspeople whose names the show has been quietly building up over the previous 2 seasons. The horror is in the specificity. He is not destroying a city of strangers. He is taking the people you have come to know and turning them into furniture. The mailman becomes a fire hydrant. The pizza delivery teenager is sent into a kind of permanent terrified loop. A character whose face you remember from a side joke in an earlier episode is briefly visible in the background, partially turned into glass. The show treats each of these as a small, bright punchline, the way Bill himself would. You laugh, mostly, because what else can you do? And then a little later you realize that the show has, in the space of a few minutes, ended the ordinary lives of every character it spent 2 seasons making you love. After the first wave of personal cruelty, the apocalypse expands. Bill builds his pyramid, the triangular pyramid stronghold that hovers over the town in the place where his rift opened. The pyramid is, in design, a huge version of his own body, with a giant eye at the front, looking out over the valley. He fills the pyramid with his henchmaniacs and converts a number of human prisoners into ornaments. He hosts what the show stages as a kind of nightmarish dinner party in the pyramid's central chamber, in which the henchmaniacs reminisce about other dimensions they have ruined and discuss what they will do once they break out of Gravity Falls into the larger world. The conversation on its surface is light. The implications are vast. The henchmaniacs, listening to Bill talk about how to extend the weirdness beyond the barrier, are essentially planning to do to the planet what they have just done to a small Oregon town. The show, in giving you this scene, finally lets you understand what would happen if the cage of Gravity Falls were ever to break. The henchmaniacs are not a regional problem. They are a planetary problem in waiting. A great deal of the second part of Weirdmageddon is concerned with Mabel. After the rift opens, in the chaos of the first apocalyptic minute, Mabel is taken by Bill into a separate pocket dimension, a private prison disguised as a paradise, tailored specifically to her tastes. The bubble, as the show calls it, is a self-contained reality made of all of Mabel's favorite things. There is a candy castle, there are eternal slumber parties, there are unicorns and friendly cats and a sky that does not change. The bubble is, on its surface, a present from Bill to a girl he has just kidnapped. But the show makes it clear, almost immediately, that the bubble is a trap. It is designed to keep Mabel inside, distracted, occupied, never quite confronting the fact that what she is enjoying is a curated infinity in which she does not have to grow up. Bill knows that one of the deepest fears in Mabel's own mind, the fear the show has been seeding all season, is the fear of becoming a teenager and losing the version of herself she has been all summer. He has, in essence, locked her in the dream of remaining 12 forever. He calls it a kindness. It is one of the cruelest things he does in the entire show. Dipper, who has been outside the bubble organizing the resistance, enters the bubble to rescue her. The episode that follows is one of the show's most emotionally direct stretches. He has to convince his sister that the paradise she is in is a prison, that the version of herself she has become inside it is a costume, that the fear of growing up is a fear they will have to face together, outside, in the wreckage. The whole episode is, in a quiet way, an argument with the temptation Bill is offering. Bill's offer to humanity is, when you strip it down, always some version of this offer. He will give you what you think you want. He will give it to you on a permanent loop. All you have to do is let him write the loop. Mabel, in the end, refuses. She breaks the bubble. She steps out into the apocalyptic landscape. The show treats the moment as a milestone. It is, on a thematic level, what kills Bill before Stan ever pulls a trigger. The audience he most wanted to capture, the one he most wanted to keep, walked out. The third part of Weirdmageddon is the longest and the most ambitious, and arguably the best stretch of animation the show ever produced. It begins with the assembled cast of survivors building a makeshift assault vehicle out of the mystery shack itself. Soos, the loyal handyman of the family, leads the conversion of the shack into a walking war robot. The mystery shack, by the time the episode is half done, is a giant articulated mechanical version of itself, with arms and legs and pistons and Soos at the controls. The shack walks out of the woods. It walks toward Bill's pyramid. The show, in this sequence, gives you all the visual delight of a giant robot fight in a children's cartoon, while also, underneath, building toward the most emotionally devastating ending of any animated series of its era. The contrast is, again, the engine of the show's power. Bill, watching the shack approach, is delighted. He treats it as one more entertainment in the long list of entertainments he has lined up for himself. The fight, when it happens, is shorter than you would expect. Bill knocks the shack over. The survivors scatter. He captures the family. He puts them in a cage. He proposes, as one would expect, a deal. The deal is the one that traps him. Ford, who has been brought before Bill, refuses to give him the equation he needs to break the barrier. Bill threatens, then bargains, then begins to torture Stan in front of Ford to extract the cooperation by other means. Stan, in this scene, behaves exactly the way Stan has behaved through the entire show, with a stubborn cheerfulness in the face of unbearable circumstances. He insults Bill. He spits in his eye. He refuses to break. The show implies, in those few minutes, that there is no version of the Pines family in which Stan gives up his brother for anything Bill can do to him. Ford, watching this, understands what is being asked. He invents, on the spot, the swap. The two of them perform a covert exchange of clothes and identity in the moment they are alone together. The show makes a small visual joke of it. Stan puts on Ford's coat. Ford puts on Stan's. They re-emerge in front of Bill. Ford, pretending to be Stan, makes a defiant final speech. Stan, pretending to be Ford, agrees to give Bill what he wants. Bill, recognizing what he believes is a moment of surrender, enters Stan's mind to claim it. And Stan, who has been carrying inside himself the memory eraser Ford gave him, activates it. The mind he is in, the mind Bill has just made his own, is erased. Bill, having no other dimension to retreat to, is erased with it. He flickers, he screams, he stretches out into something hideous and pleading, and the screen fills with images that the show has hidden symbols inside, and then the apocalypse ends, all at once, and the world snaps back to its ordinary self. The aftermath is quiet. The show holds on the survivors for a long stretch of slow, tender, almost wordless scenes. Mabel sits in front of Stan, who does not remember her, and walks him through her scrapbook page by page. She names every photograph. She names every memory. Bit by bit, the man who erased himself starts to come back. The Pines family, whose love for each other was the actual weapon that killed Bill, performs the slow restoration of one of their own. The town wakes up around them, slowly returning to normal. The stone people becoming people again, the streamers becoming a deputy again, the fire hydrant becoming a mailman. The barrier dissolves. The henchmaniacs are gone. The sky is the color of a normal sky again. The show, in those final minutes, gives you almost nothing of Bill. He has been so totally erased that the only image of him that remains is the small statue in the post-credits scene, the one that introduced the long, ambiguous, post-finale era of his afterlife. That afterlife has been, in the years since the show ended, one of the more strange, long-form storytelling experiments in modern animation. The show has not, formally, returned for a third season. Hirsch has spoken about why, mostly in interviews, where he has said that the story he wanted to tell was complete, and that a continuation would dilute what the show was about. But the universe of Gravity Falls has continued in other forms. There has been a book of mock journal entries written from Ford's perspective, which gives further detail on the lore of the town and its creatures, including extensive notes on Bill. There have been animated shorts. There has been a published collection of Stan's con artist back catalog. There has been an in-universe board game, and in 2024, there was the long-awaited book that gave Bill himself a chance to talk. The book, presented in the voice of Bill, is one of the more interesting expansions of his lore. It is, deliberately, an unreliable narrator's autobiography. It is filled with claims that contradict each other. It treats the events of the show as a wound to Bill's pride that he is still, even from beyond his apparent death, trying to spin in his favor. It tells, as already mentioned, the story of his home dimension and his ascent into the third dimension. It tells, In fragments, the story of his time on Earth before his deal with Ford, including encounters with cultures who saw him as a god, and with civilizations who, in his telling, he convinced to engineer their own collapse. It includes recipes. It includes drawings. It includes encoded messages that fans have spent the years since its publication decoding. It includes, crucially, a sequence of pages near its end, in which Bill, addressing the reader directly, speaks in the kind of charm and warmth that the show always implied was the bait at the center of his trap. He offers the reader a deal. He invites the reader to take it. The book closes, almost, on his outstretched hand. The book is, in this sense, the same trap the statue is, but delivered through a different medium. Whether or not it is part of an actual ongoing storyline or simply a piece of expanded merchandise that plays with the show's themes, is something the production has been careful not to definitively confirm. The implication is clear enough. He is, in some way, still around. What that book also confirms, by inference, is that Bill is one of the few cartoon villains of his era who has been allowed to keep accruing lore after his show ended. Most animated villains of the early 2010s, when their series concluded, were treated as fixed quantities. Their stories closed, their canon was complete. Bill, by contrast, has been given a deepening characterization in the years since his death, an unusual privilege. The reasons for that are partly to do with how much groundwork the show laid for him, and partly to do with the way the fan community has continued to engage with him. The Cipher hunt brought hundreds of people into the woods to find him. The merchandise has continued to feature him on plush toys, on shirts, on collectible figures, in costumes worn at conventions. Cosplayers have built triangle costumes with internal lighting and a single rotating eye. Fan artists have drawn versions of him in human form, a habit the official material has occasionally indulged. In one short near the end of the show's original run, Bill is briefly shown in a human approximation of himself, with blonde hair and a yellow blazer and a triangular bow tie. The image is rare enough that it has become one of the most circulated images in fan art of the show. The point is that Bill has had, in the years since his death, an active second life. He has continued to grow as a character even though the character himself, on screen, is mostly gone. There is, in considering Bill's afterlife, a particular fan theory that has run alongside the official material for years, which is worth treating as a theory and not as canon. The theory holds that Bill, in his final moments, did successfully bargain with the Axolotl, and that the bargain returned him to some form of existence in a different dimension, or at a different point in time, or in a different shape. The theory is supported, by fans, by the inclusion of the Axolotl Prayer in the show's encoded material, by the persistent presence of the statue, by the way the 2024 book leans into the suggestion of his survival. The theory is, however, not officially confirmed. The show has not committed to it. The book, when it has addressed it, has been deliberately ambiguous. Whether Bill, in any reading you would call canonical, is still alive, is something nobody outside the production team can say for certain, and the production team has so far refused to say. He is, in this state, both dead and not quite dead, which is, when you think about it, exactly the kind of half-existence a creature like Bill would find amusing. He has spent his career as a being made of mind stuff, present whenever someone thinks about him hard enough. The show ended. The thoughts did not. Going back through the show with all of this in mind, you start to notice how much of Bill's groundwork the writers laid in episodes that have nothing to do with him on the surface. In the second episode of the first season, there is a flicker of a triangle shape in a doorway that you only notice on rewatch. In an episode about a haunted convenience store, a brief shot of an old advertisement on a wall includes a one-eyed shape. In an episode about Mabel attempting a love potion gone wrong, a triangle pattern appears on the wallpaper behind a critical scene. These are not, the show wants you to know, accidents. The art department spent a meaningful amount of time hiding Bill in the background of the first season. The reasoning, in interviews the production team has given since, was twofold. The first reason was simply to reward the kind of obsessive viewer the show was designed to attract, the kind of viewer who would freeze a frame and check the corners. The second reason was structural. The show wanted, when Bill finally appeared on screen, for the audience to feel that he had been there all along, that they had been looking at him without knowing it. The trick worked. The first reaction of many fans to the 19th episode of the first season, after the initial shock of meeting Bill in his proper form, was to go back to the early episodes and start checking the corners. They found him in places they had never noticed. The show, having promised a hidden world, had buried evidence of it in plain sight. This kind of layering extends to the way Bill speaks. His vocabulary, the show's writers have said in interviews, was deliberately chosen to be a mix of carnival barker, used car salesman, and cosmic horror narrator. He calls humans meat bags. He calls bodies skin suits. He calls the human mind a delicate machine. He calls Earth an interesting rock with some smudges on it. He greets death with congratulations. He greets birth with sympathy. He has a particular vocal habit, which the voice actor has talked about, of stretching certain consonants for emphasis, of letting his voice creak slightly at the start of certain words to imply that he is forcing himself to sound friendly when in fact he is not. He also has, scattered throughout his appearances, a series of running phrases that fans have collected into a kind of informal collection of his greatest lines. He greets the existence of reality with a frequent reminder that reality is, in his telling, an illusion, and that the universe is a hologram, and that buying gold is, in his recommendation, a hedge against the inevitable end of physical matter. The line is delivered, in the show, as a kind of cheerful conspiracy theory. It is also, the show implies, partly sincere. He believes the universe is closer to the metaphysics of his home dimension than humans realize. He believes that humans cling to the solidity of their world out of fear of what is on the other side of it. He is, by his own lights, trying to inform them. He is, by the show's lights, attempting to soften them up for an offer they cannot evaluate clearly. The voice that delivers all of this, as has already been mentioned, is the voice of the show's creator, Alex Hirsch. Hirsch voiced both Stan and Ford, and Bill, and a number of smaller characters across the show's run. The fact that Bill is voiced by the same person who voices the brothers who eventually defeat him is, in itself, a small piece of the show's internal mirror logic. Hirsch is, in essence, playing both sides of the central conflict. The show is, in the most literal way, a war between different parts of the same artist's voice. Hirsch has spoken about Bill's voice in interviews. He has said that he developed it by recording himself doing variants of various carnival voices, then pitching the audio up. He has said that the laugh, the long maniacal cackle that Bill produces at moments of triumph, was a single take that he could not reliably reproduce, and that the production team kept it in part because it sounded slightly off in a way that suggested the voice was not entirely under control. Hirsch has also been candid about the fact that voicing Bill was, on the days he had to do it, a draining experience. The character, he has said, is one he had to sit inside for hours at a time to deliver, and the act of sitting inside a being like that is, even for the person who invented him, not a comfortable thing. By most accounts of the production, the recording schedule did not allow for Bill to be tracked in long stretches because the voice was, by its nature, a strain. He had to be performed in small bursts. The pacing of his scenes in the show, the way Bill tends to appear in concentrated doses rather than long, uninterrupted dialogues, was partly a creative choice, and partly a function of how much of the voice could be produced on any given day. That production reality has a small consequence for how Bill feels on screen. He has a kind of compressed energy. He is rarely in a scene for very long. When he is, he uses every second. His monologues are designed to feel like they have been jammed into a smaller container than they want to fit in, which is, when you think about it, exactly the right shape for the character. He is a being whose mind contains universes, performing for a few seconds at a time on a small screen, then disappearing. The audience never gets to be tired of him, because the show never lets him exhaust his welcome. He is gone, often, before you have finished processing the last thing he said. That restraint is one of the reasons he is remembered the way he is. He does not overstay. There is a small but important strand of the show's lore that involves Bill's role in time. The show has, in addition to Bill, a separate organization of time travelers from the future, run by a character called Time Baby. The time travelers play a recurring role in several episodes. They are presented, mostly, as comic figures, although Time Baby himself is treated with appropriate weight, an enormous infant on a throne who governs the timeline. The intersection between Bill and the time travelers is, in the show's universe, ancient and contentious. Bill, who exists outside the ordinary flow of time, regards Time Baby as a rival. Time Baby, who maintains the timeline, regards Bill as an existential threat to causality. The two of them, in the show's mythology, have been at war on and off for a long time. In the events of Weirdmageddon, Time Baby appears briefly to confront Bill, asserting his authority over the timeline and demanding that the apocalypse cease. Bill, with a gesture, disintegrates him. Time Baby's death, in animation terms, is a startling moment, both because it is sudden and because it indicates the scale of what Bill is capable of when fully unconstrained. He has, in a single beat, removed the supposed cosmic guardian of time from the board. The implication is large. Whatever rules govern the universe of Gravity Falls, Bill, at the height of his power, is allowed to break the most fundamental of them. The show, after this scene, does not return to Time Baby in any meaningful way. Whether he stays dead, whether his absence has consequences for the timeline, whether Bill's defeat undoes his murder, are questions the show does not answer. They are part of the larger atmosphere of unfinished business that Bill leaves behind. That atmosphere is, in itself, one of Bill's most enduring contributions to the show. Gravity Falls is, for all its cheerfulness, a series with a meaningful body count. People are turned into chairs. A baby god of time is vaporized. An old college friend has his mind shattered. A great uncle is reduced to a blank page. Pets die. Childhood ends. The show is, at its core, an exploration of loss disguised as a summer comedy. Bill is the engine of much of that loss. He is also, on a less literal level, the personification of it. He represents the part of growing up where you discover that not all damage can be undone, that some bargains cannot be unmade, that some friendships are revealed, in retrospect, to have been predatory all along. The show is honest, in a way many shows for the same audience are not, about the cost of those discoveries. It does not tell you that all wounds can be healed. It does not tell you that you will get all of your innocence back. It tells you, with great care, that you can love each other through what you have lost, and that the love is what makes the loss survivable. Bill, in this reading, is the show's argument against the idea that nothing ever really hurts. He hurts. He is allowed to hurt. He is defeated. But the wounds he leaves are real, and they do not fully close. The Pines family, in the closing minutes of the show, is happy, but it is the kind of happiness that has cost something. The cost was Bill. The cost was always going to be Bill. There is a particular sequence near the end of Weirdmageddon, when Stan's mind is being slowly restored by Mabel's scrapbook, in which the show stages the reconstruction in a way that lets you sit with the weight of what just happened. Mabel sits on the floor of the Mystery Shack with a single photo album open across her lap. She names each photograph. She talks about each memory. The man across from her, who has forgotten everything, sits quietly. The family pig, Waddles, comes over and sits in the man's lap. He looks down at the pig. He does not know its name. Mabel says it gently. He says it after her. The show holds on this moment for what feels like a long time. There is no music or only the faintest piece of music. There is no dialogue from any other character. It is, in the cleanest possible terms, the show's argument against everything Bill was. He believed nothing could be rebuilt once he had taken it. He was wrong. The rebuilding is slow and incomplete and full of holes, but it works. The man across from Mabel begins to remember. The pig in his lap is, eventually, recognized. The brother in the doorway, when he steps forward, is, eventually, named. The family that Bill spent decades trying to take apart simply, in the end, refuses to be taken apart. The show's argument, made through this scene, is that the bond between people who love each other is, in some cases, a stronger material than reality itself. It can be rebuilt out of a scrapbook. It does not need Bill's permission to exist. It is the actual answer to the question Bill spent the whole series asking. He asked, in essence, "What is your weakness?" The Pines family, in answer, showed him that the weakness he was looking for was something they did not have. There is one more dimension of Bill's character worth lingering on, which is the question of what kind of being he is in moral terms, and the show's treatment of that question is, for a children's animation, unusually sophisticated. He is not, the show insists, simply a representation of evil. He is also, in a strange way, a representation of certain kinds of attention. He pays attention to people that nobody else pays attention to. He sees Ford's loneliness when nobody else does. He sees Gideon's resentment when nobody else does. He sees Dipper's insecurity when nobody else does. He uses that attention against them, but the attention itself, before its use, is, in a way, real. He notices what other people miss. He is, in this sense, an exaggeration of a recognizable kind of predator, the kind that knows how to make a person feel seen for the first time in their life, and then bills them for the privilege. The show wants you to understand that the danger of Bill is not just that he is monstrous. The danger of Bill is that he is, in his particular way, very good at seeing people. He could, in theory, have been a real friend. He chose, instead, to be a parasite. The show is careful not to suggest that the choice was inevitable. He could have done otherwise. He simply, in his vast and ancient amusement, did not want to. That subtlety is one of the reasons Bill works as well as he does on rewatches. Children, watching the show for the first time, see Bill as a fun cartoon monster who has to be defeated. Adults, returning to the show, see something a great deal more uncomfortable. They see a charming abuser. They see a being whose method of manipulation is recognizable from real life, and not just from fantasy. Bill, in this reading, is one of the most accurate animated portraits of a particular kind of charismatic predator that has ever been put on television. He flatters, he isolates, he offers small kindnesses, he extracts small favors. He extends the relationship over a long time. He insists, when the wisher begins to have doubts, that the wisher is the only one who truly understands him. He punishes, when the wisher begins to pull away, with an intensity that is calibrated to remind them of how dependent they have become. He never, at any point, lifts a finger that is not part of a longer plan. The show treats this with appropriate care. It is, in some episodes, almost subtle enough to slip past the audience entirely. But it is there. The character is, in addition to his cosmic horror, also a portrait of a kind of small human cruelty, magnified to the scale of a god. That magnification is part of why he lingers. If you sit with the show long enough, you start to notice how much of Bill's lore is conveyed not through dialogue but through symbols. The triangle, the eye, the hand outstretched for a deal, the color scheme of yellow and black, the bow tie, the top hat. These are the elements the show uses to indicate his presence in any given scene, and they appear, in fragmentary form, across nearly every episode. The art department for Gravity Falls put real effort into baking these symbols into the texture of the show. The wallpaper of the Mystery Shack contains, in close inspection, a pattern of small triangles. The carpet in Ford's secret lab is a pattern of eyes. The stained glass window of the elevator that descends into the secret lab contains, when illuminated, a triangle with one eye. The cover of every journal that Ford writes carries a hand with 6 fingers and a triangle underneath. The decorations in the Mystery Shack include figurines and statues whose silhouettes, on close inspection, share the triangle profile. The show, in its design, is constantly whispering Bill's name, even in episodes where he does not appear by name at all. This habit is most pronounced in the episodes that deal directly with the secret history of the town. There is, in the second season, a sequence in which Dipper and Mabel descend into a hidden bunker that Ford built decades earlier. The bunker is, in design, dense with hidden symbols. The walls have triangle patterns embedded in them. The control panels are labeled with eyes and symbols. The diagrams Ford drew, which line the walls, contain references to Bill in the margins, often in code. The bunker is, in effect, a museum of Ford's slowly dawning realization that the Muse he trusted was something far darker than he had assumed, and the museum's walls keep the story for him in a way his shattered memory could not. The art design here is extraordinary. You can pause the episode at almost any frame in the bunker sequence and find a new piece of information you missed on first viewing. The show wants you to look. It rewards you for looking. It expects, on some level, that you will rewatch, that you will treat each episode as a piece of evidence rather than a piece of disposable entertainment. This was, at the time, an unusually demanding way to make a children's cartoon. It is also, in retrospect, one of the reasons the show has endured. It was built to be examined. The most striking single piece of symbolic detail in the entire show is, arguably, the moment in the second season when the show finally pulls back the camera in Ford's lab and shows you the full layout of the carpet, the panels, the diagrams, the wall hangings, all at once. The whole room is a portrait of Bill in fragmentary form. You realize, watching that pullback, that Ford has been working in a room that is, in essence, a shrine to the creature who destroyed his life. The show does not comment on this directly. The visuals do all of the work. Ford, having recognized what Bill is, has not yet been able to dismantle the architecture of his obsession. He has just kept working in the room, with the patterns of his betrayer literally underneath his feet. It is one of the small genius touches of the show's production design. The character cannot escape the symbols, even when he knows what they mean. This obsession with symbols, of course, has a counterpart in the real world. The triangle with an eye, the so-called all-seeing eye, has a long and tangled history outside the show. It appears on currency, it appears in religious iconography, it appears in the imagery of various fraternal orders, often, particularly Freemasonry. The show is, in using this symbol for Bill, drawing on centuries of associations, some of them harmless, some of them tangled with the kind of conspiracy thinking that has built up around symbols of this kind in the modern era. The show is generally careful about how it engages with this. It does not, for instance, suggest that any real-world organization is in fact controlled by Bill. It does not, for the most part, encourage real-world conspiracy thinking. It uses the iconography because the iconography is recognizable, because it carries a certain quality of half-remembered menace, and because, in the show's universe, those symbols are, retroactively, traces of Bill's influence on human history. The show is playing with myth, not making accusations. It is, in a sense, claiming the symbol back from the people who use it badly and giving it to a triangle who, at least, has the decency to acknowledge that he is up to no good. That said, the show does make one fairly bold mythological claim about Bill, which is that he has been involved, behind the scenes, in significant historical events. A brief montage early in his appearances suggests, with a wink, that Bill has whispered in the ears of various powerful figures across human history. The implications are deliberately vague. The show does not, for instance, name a specific president or pharaoh or general whose downfall was Bill's doing. It implies that the pattern of influence is general. Where humans have made catastrophic mistakes, the show suggests, Bill has often been somewhere in the background. The pyramid carving you see, briefly, in one early Weirdmageddon scene, is the clearest version of this claim. Bill, in the show's universe, has been worshipped at least once by a human civilization. He was, the implication is, viewed as a god, and his disappearance from that civilization may itself have been part of the chain of events that brought the civilization down. The show, again, is careful not to lecture on this. The image flashes by. You can decide what to do with it. The expanded material has, predictably, gone further. The 2024 book, which is presented in the voice of Bill, is full of claims about his historical influence. He claims, with characteristic vagueness, to have been present at various pivotal moments in human history. He claims, with characteristic glee, to have steered some of them. He claims credit for several disasters and writes off others as not interesting enough to bother with. The book's account of his pre-Gravity Falls history is, on its face, extensive. It is also, again, openly unreliable. He is an unreliable narrator by design. Whether he was actually present at the events he describes is something the show has been careful to keep ambiguous. Some of the claims are obviously playful, some of them are more chilling, in the sense that the book describes events in ways that suggest the author was, in fact, there. The reader is left, deliberately, in the uncomfortable position of not quite knowing which version of him to trust. A particular layer of his backstory, present mostly in the encoded materials and the expanded book, concerns his relationships with other beings of his order. He claims, at various points, to have known other dream demons. He claims, at other points, to have engineered the destruction of some of them. He claims to have ascended through some unseen cosmic hierarchy by feeding on the powers of his peers. He talks, in a few of these passages, about the axolotl with the careful tone of a creature who has been previously warned to stay out of that being's way. The axolotl, the higher entity who is rumored to have granted Bill the deal at his end, is presented in these materials as the closest thing the show's universe has to a benign cosmic authority. The axolotl is older than Bill. The axolotl is calmer than Bill. The axolotl, by all accounts in the material, does not generally intervene in the affairs of lesser beings, but is capable of doing so when invoked properly. The exact nature of the deal Bill is said to have made with the axolotl is left, even in the expanded material, deliberately vague. There is a passage in the book that reads almost like a prayer to the axolotl, written in Bill's own voice, in which he asks, in essence, for a chance to live again, in any form, even one that does not resemble what he is now. Whether the prayer was answered, the book does not say. It only implies that the prayer was made. There are also implications, scattered through the book and through certain encoded fragments, of other dream demons who exist somewhere outside the visible universe, beings who, like Bill, are capable of crossing into mortal minds. The book mentions, in passing, that Bill has met them. The book does not name them. It treats them as a sort of distant club of similar predators with whom Bill maintains, at best, a complicated and often hostile relationship. Some of them, the book implies, are still out there. Whether this implication is meant to set up future stories or simply to expand the texture of the universe is something the production has, again, refused to make explicit. The way the show treats Bill's worship by humans is, on rewatch, one of its most interesting subtleties. There is, in the second season, a small reveal about the Society of the Blind Eye, the secret organization in Gravity Falls dedicated to erasing memories of the supernatural. The society, on its surface, is a force opposed to Bill, in that it is trying to keep the human population unaware of the kind of creature he is. On a deeper level, the society is also, in its own way, a creation of Bill's influence, in that its existence is a response to the destabilizing glimpses that Ford and Fiddleford had through the portal. Without Bill, there would have been no society. The two of them, the demon and the order, are bound to each other in a way the show is careful to suggest without overstating. The society is not a worship cult. It is a defensive reflex. But the defensive reflex would not exist without the original wound, and the original wound is Bill. Even the institutions that exist to oppose him, the show implies, are shaped by him. He is the reason they exist. There is also, scattered through the show, a small set of moments in which Bill has effectively been worshipped by individual humans, even if no formal cult is shown. Gideon, in the first season, is the clearest example of this, in that he treats Bill, in their few interactions, with the kind of nervous reverence that a follower shows a god. He calls him Sir. He apologizes for inadequate offerings. He treats their relationship as transactional only on the surface, while in fact functioning as a kind of devotee. Bill, of course, has no interest in being worshipped by Gideon. Gideon is, to him, a useful child, and the child's worship is just one of the small entertainments that the relationship provides. The expanded material adds further detail to this dynamic, suggesting that Bill has, over the centuries, accumulated a long succession of individual cultists across various cultures, none of whom he particularly valued, all of whom he used for short periods and discarded. The reason Ford's relationship with him is unique in this telling is not that Bill loved Ford, it is that Bill found Ford useful for a longer period than most. Ford was, in the bleakest reading, a relationship that lasted because Ford had a longer shelf life than the average human deal partner. The book even, in its more poisonous moments, lets Bill brag about the fact that he managed to extract years of useful work out of Ford before Ford caught on. There is, in passages like this, the sense that the relationship was, on Bill's side, never personal at all. It was, on Ford's side, a great love. That asymmetry is, in many ways, the deepest wound the show ever inflicts on a character. The way the show treats the matter of who actually knows about Bill, in town, is another small detail worth noticing. By the end of the series, the human population of Gravity Falls is roughly divided into three groups. There are those who have, by the events of the final episodes, met Bill directly and survived the experience. These include the Pines family, Soos, Wendy, McGucket, and a small handful of others. There are those who have seen Bill's effects without quite seeing him, who have lived through Weirdmageddon and remember it as a kind of collective hallucination. These include most of the named townspeople. And there are those who, by virtue of memory erasure or simply having been elsewhere, do not really know what happened. The show implies that, in the years after the finale, the town settles back into a state of partial knowledge, with a few people carrying the truth, and the rest treating the events as half-remembered nightmare. Bill, in this aftermath, becomes, in a sense, a folktale within his own setting. He is the bad summer. He is the time the sky cracked. He is the reason certain people, certain places, certain rooms in the back of certain old buildings are not to be entered alone after dark. He is, the show implies, the shape that the town's mythology will quietly carry forward into its future. In the same way, every long-lived place carries some half-forgotten dread. The fact that the actual creature is, in the show's terms, mostly dead, does not stop the town from continuing to use his shape as a way to talk about everything frightening that has ever happened there. He is, in the long run, more present as a folktale than he ever was as a demon. That is, in a way, the worst victory he could possibly have. He has become a story that people tell. One of the most interesting things about Bill, considered as a piece of cultural artifact rather than just a character, is how widely his image has spread beyond the show. He has become one of the most recognizable cartoon villains of his generation. His silhouette, a simple yellow triangle with a black eye, is instantly readable even to people who have never watched Gravity Falls. His phrases have entered the broader internet vocabulary. His face appears in fan art, in memes, in cosplay, in merchandising, in fan animations, in tribute songs, in countless small artistic experiments by viewers who have spent years thinking about him. The reasons for this reach are, in some sense, the same reasons he works inside the show. He is graphically simple, which makes him easy to draw. He is verbally distinctive, which makes him easy to quote. He is morally complicated, which makes him easy to argue about. He is dead but possibly not dead, which makes him easy to keep speculating about. He is, in short, almost designed to outlive the show he came from. The show, in retiring without a third season, in some sense gave Bill the gift of permanent unfinished business. He has not been resolved. He has not been rendered safe. He has been, instead, paused in the moment of his most ambiguous defeat, and the pause has become, in fan culture, a kind of indefinite hum. Part of what keeps that hum going is, of course, the way the original creators of the show have continued to engage with his legacy. Alex Hirsch has, over the years, given various interviews in which he has spoken about Bill in ways that keep the question of his afterlife slightly open. He has, in particular, kept alive the possibility that some part of Bill survives, in some form, somewhere. He has also, on his own social media, occasionally posted content in Bill's voice, sometimes in response to current events, sometimes simply for the entertainment of fans. These small interventions have the effect of keeping Bill, as a character, continuously alive in a low-key way. He is never fully present in the way he was during the show's run. He is also never fully gone. He is, in the official treatment of him, treated as a presence whose proper habitat is partial existence. He is the half-visible thing in the corner of the post-show period. That is, again, an unusually rich way to retire a villain, and it is part of why his cultural footprint has remained large. There is, in considering how Bill operates within scenes, a particular technical detail worth noting, which is the way the show animates his movement. In most of his appearances, Bill is rendered with a slightly different visual texture than the rest of the show. He floats where other characters walk. He stretches where other characters bend. He produces light from within his body, which the show animates as a soft yellow halo. He casts no shadow, or only a stylized one. When he speaks, his eye sometimes does not move at all, while at other times it darts around with unnatural speed. The animators, in interviews, have spoken about the deliberate decision to make Bill feel just slightly off-model compared to the rest of the show. He is, in essence, drawn in a different language than the other characters. The show's universe has a visual grammar. Bill, on screen, breaks that grammar. The effect is subtle. You may not consciously notice it on first viewing, but your eye notices, and your eye communicates the noticing as discomfort. You feel, watching him, that he does not quite belong in the picture, and you feel this feeling without knowing why. This is again the work of the production design at its most considered. Bill is animated to feel like an interloper. He is a character from a different show, briefly visiting this one, and he behaves as if he is aware of that. The choice extends to the audio mix as well. Bill's voice, in the show, is often presented with a small amount of distortion that the other characters do not get. There is, when he speaks, sometimes a hint of a second voice underneath the main voice, a lower-pitched layer that the sound designers added to give him a slight chord rather than a single tone. By most accounts, this was a way of suggesting that the voice you hear is not actually his real voice, but a kind of friendly mask he is wearing, with something deeper underneath. The deeper voice never breaks fully through, except possibly in his final moments of erasure, where the audio mix is layered and chaotic in a way that fans have spent years dissecting. There are theories, supported by audio analysis posts, that Bill's final scream contains, when slowed, fragments of language in multiple human tongues, and even some sounds that do not correspond to any known human language. The show has not formally confirmed what is in the audio. Whether the layered sound is intentional cryptography or simply the result of a chaotic mix is, like much else with Bill, deliberately left open. The show has, throughout, taken the position that mystery is a feature rather than a bug, and the mix of Bill's final scene is part of that mystery. If you want to understand his philosophy, the closest the show gets to a formal articulation of it comes in a short monologue Bill delivers near the start of Weirdmageddon, in which he addresses his henchmaniacs and the kidnapped Pines family at once. He explains, in his own words, what he believes the universe is. He describes ordinary reality as a thin crust over a much wider chaos. He describes the rules of physics as a kind of polite agreement that the universe maintains to keep weaker minds calm. He describes Gravity Falls itself as a tier in that agreement, a place where the laws have always been slightly more flexible, which is why it became for him a foothold. He describes his goal, in the broadest terms, as the lifting of that agreement. He wants to unlock the world. He wants to let the chaos through. He wants, in his own framing, to free the universe from the boring rigidity of physical law. The monologue is delivered with the cheerful conviction of a man who genuinely believes he is doing the universe a favor, and who finds it amusing that the universe insists, ungratefully, on being saved from him. He is not, the show implies, a villain in his own internal account. He is, in his own telling, a liberator. The fact that liberation, in his version, involves turning his neighbors into furniture is, to him, a side effect rather than a goal. The show is at pains to undercut this self-image. The visuals make clear that what he is doing is suffering, not liberation, but the words he uses to describe himself are presented with sufficient sincerity that you understand he is not lying to himself. He genuinely believes the cosmic order he proposes is better than the one humans currently live in. He just happens to be the only one who would enjoy living in it. That philosophy is, in essence, a kind of cosmic nihilism with a sales pitch attached. He believes nothing is real. He believes nothing matters. He believes that the only meaningful response to a meaningless universe is to enjoy yourself, which, for him, means consuming as much of it as possible. The show frames this as a kind of dark mirror of certain real-world philosophical positions, although it does not lecture about which ones. It simply presents Bill as a being who has worked out a coherent worldview and lives by it. The worldview is bad, in the show's clear judgment, not because nihilism is automatically bad, but because the conclusions Bill draws from nihilism are. He does not respond to meaninglessness by deciding that the small kindnesses of human life are precious. He responds by deciding that the small kindnesses of human life are funny, and can therefore be destroyed for entertainment. The show's argument, in answer, is delivered through the Pines family. They live in the same universe Bill describes. They do not believe in cosmic meaning either, in any explicit way. They simply love each other anyway. That love is, in the show's clearest moral position, the actual rebuttal to Bill's nihilism. He is right about the universe being chaotic. He is wrong about the conclusion to draw from that. The family's response to the same data is to hold on to each other. His response is to laugh and start turning people into furniture. The show is clear about which response it prefers. It is worth dwelling, briefly, on the way the show stages Bill's interactions with each member of the family, because each interaction reveals a different facet of him. With Ford, Bill is the manipulator who knows his target intimately, who has spent decades inside Ford's mind. He addresses Ford with a particular tone, half affectionate, half mocking, which the show implies is the way an abusive partner addresses an estranged spouse. With Dipper, Bill is the playful tormentor, who treats the boy as a curiosity, a toy, an interesting variable to poke at. He calls him Pine Tree with a kind of fond contempt, the way an adult might call a child by a nickname they have invented, just to see the child wince. With Mabel, Bill is the salesman who pitches the perfect dream world, the bubble of eternal childhood, who treats her as a customer rather than as an enemy. With Stan, Bill is, until almost the very end, dismissive. He calls Stan the wrong twin. He treats Stan as the joke of the family, the brother who is not worth bothering with. That dismissal is, in the end, the thing that kills him. He does not see the threat because he has, from the start, decided that Stan is not the kind of being who could pose one. The show, in this distribution of attitudes, gives you a portrait of how Bill assesses people. He looks at them, decides what kind of resource they are, and treats them accordingly. The framework is consistent. It also, by design, contains a blind spot. The blind spot is, in Stan's case, large enough to fit a coffin. It is also worth, since we are sitting with him for a couple of hours, considering the small set of moments in the show where Bill is shown without his usual mask of cheerfulness. These moments are rare. They are also extremely revealing. In the second season, there is a single frame, near the end of one of the confrontations, in which Bill's eye briefly changes shape, becoming a vertical slit rather than the round pupil it usually shows. the frame lasts for a fraction of a second. Fans have dissected it for years. As far as fans have pieced together, supported by some of the expanded material, Bill in this moment has briefly dropped the costume of his friendly form and shown something closer to what he actually is underneath. The form underneath, the show implies, is not a triangle. It is something much larger, much darker, much more shapeless. The triangle is a simplification he wears in order to be visible to humans without driving them mad. The form underneath is what he actually is in his home dimension. The show never shows it directly. It only lets the slit eye flicker through, briefly, as a kind of warning. You see, for that fraction of a second, what is wearing the costume, and the costume looks, by comparison, almost reassuring. The show is using a small visual trick to communicate a large idea. The yellow triangle, the friendly cartoon, the chatty dealmaker, is, in essence, a sock puppet for something else. The something else is what is actually doing the negotiating. The puppet is what humans get to see. That implication is, in a sense, the deepest layer of Bill's lore. The character you have spent 2 seasons fearing is, in this reading, just the visible face of a much vaster being. The deals you have watched him make are, in this reading, not made by the triangle. They are made by the thing inside the triangle, which uses the triangle in the same way Bill uses Ford's body in the rare scenes where he possesses a human form as a temporary instrument designed to make a particular kind of communication possible. The show, in its restraint, never lets you see the thing inside. You only get the puppet. You only get the cipher. The actual being behind the cipher is, by design, kept beyond the camera's reach. That choice is, in the show's overall design, important. It means that Bill, even after his apparent death, retains a layer of unknowability. You never quite saw all of him. You saw the part of him that he was willing to show. The part of him that you did not see could, in theory, still be out there, in whatever dimension he came from, watching the small, slow rebuilding of Gravity Falls with the same amused curiosity he has always shown for human affairs. The show does not insist on this reading, it only allows it. One of the things that has made the post-finale years of Gravity Falls so interesting is the way the show's creators have continued to play with this layered structure. Subsequent material has been comfortable, at various points, in presenting events that may have happened in Bill's home dimension, in implying interactions with other dream beings, in suggesting that the triangle was always a face on something larger. The book published in 2024 leans into this in particular. It frames Bill's voice as a kind of public performance, with occasional cracks through which something else briefly speaks. The cracks are subtle. The reader is left with the sense that the autobiography is, like everything else about Bill, a costume. The actual self is not in the words, it is in the spaces between the words. The show has, in essence, allowed itself, in its expanded material, to do what the original series only hinted at, which is to deepen the implication that the triangle was always just one of his shapes. What is moving about this, on rewatch, is the way it changes your relationship to the Pines family. They did not defeat the whole of Bill. They defeated the version of him that they could see. They defeated the puppet. The thing that was wearing the puppet, in the deepest reading of the show, may not have been defeated at all. It may have simply, at the moment of erasure, withdrawn its hand from the costume and returned to whatever dimension it normally inhabits. The show, in this reading, is the story of one family beating one face of a much larger creature. The town is safe. The world is safe. The deeper reality, in which beings like Bill exist, is not safe in the slightest. The show is comfortable with that ending. It does not insist on a complete victory. It insists, instead, on a sufficient one. The family beat the threat that was in front of them. They did not pretend to have beaten every threat that might ever exist. That, in the show's careful moral framework, is what victory actually looks like. You do not save the universe. You save your family from this universe's worst current intention, and you accept that there will be other intentions later, and you choose, in the meantime, to love each other in the time you have. The show, in this final position, gives you something close to a description of what an adult life actually is. The fact that it does so through the medium of a yellow triangle is, in retrospect, one of the more impressive things any children's cartoon has ever done. Coming back, at the end of all this, to the question of where Bill leaves us as viewers, you find that the answer is more emotionally specific than you might have expected. Watching the show as an adult, you are not just thinking about the cartoon you saw as a child. You are thinking about the kind of person you were when you first met Bill. and the kind of person you became as you spent more time with him. He is, in this peculiar way, a character who marks the viewer as well as the show. He is, for many people who watch the series in their early teens, the first time they encountered a villain who was not, in any sense, redeemable, and who was, simultaneously, charming enough to be funny. He is the first time they understood, perhaps, that a being can be both delightful and monstrous, and that the delight is sometimes what makes the monstrousness possible. That lesson is one many viewers go on to relearn over the rest of their lives, in less cartoonish forms. The show, in giving them Bill at 13, gave them a kind of inoculation, a small early dose of a pattern they would later have to recognize in real people. The recognition is part of what makes Bill stick in the memory. He is not just a character, he is a template. The show's creator has spoken, in interviews, about wanting Gravity Falls to be the kind of show that grows with the viewer, in the sense that the things you notice on first viewing as a child are different from the things you notice on a return as an adult. Bill is the most extreme example of this design philosophy. As a child, you watch him as a fun cartoon villain. As an adult, you watch him as something much darker. The show is, in essence, the same 40 episodes for both audiences, and the audiences read it differently. Bill is the engine of that doubled reading. He carries a different weight depending on what you have lived through between viewings. That is again an unusual ambition for an animated children's show, and it is part of why Gravity Falls has accumulated the cultural footprint it has. The show is, in a real sense, a project that asks to be watched twice, and Bill is the reason the second viewing feels so different from the first. If you want to walk back through the earliest hints of him, it is worth taking a slow tour of the first season with the knowledge of what is coming, because the show's first 10 or so episodes are, in retrospect, a kind of elaborate setup that the viewer is not meant to recognize as setup until later. In the very first episode, the pilot, Dipper finds journal number 3 in the woods, hidden inside a hollow trunk under a metallic panel. The cover of the journal, which the show shows in close-up, has the 6-fingered hand and the triangle below it. The triangle is not, at this point, explained. It is simply a logo on a mysterious book. The viewer accepts it. The episodes that follow continue to feature the book heavily, and the triangle continues to appear in the corner of the frame, on the cover of the book, dozens of times, without ever being addressed. The art department, in interviews, has confirmed that this was deliberate. The triangle was intended to be a recurring, unexplained visual element of the first season, so that by the time Bill arrived as a character in the 19th episode, the audience had already been quietly conditioned to associate his shape with the idea of hidden knowledge. The show was, in the simplest terms, training your eye to recognize him before it ever named him. The same is true of certain background details that the show buried in early episodes. There is a stained glass window in the secret elevator that descends into Ford's hidden study underneath the Mystery Shack. The window is visible, briefly, in an episode in the first season when one of the characters accidentally enters the elevator without knowing what it is for. The window contains, in close inspection, a stylized triangle with a single eye, surrounded by other symbols. The viewer, on first watch, takes the window as a decorative element. The viewer, on second watch, recognizes that the show was, in essence, showing them Bill in stained glass before Bill himself had appeared in the dialogue. The whole construction of the early season is full of such moments. The carpet in Ford's hidden lab is patterned with eyes. The walls of the lab are covered in symbols. The drawings in Ford's notes, which are occasionally glimpsed in early episodes, contain references to Bill in small handwriting. The episodes were designed to be archaeological objects. They were designed to give the rewatcher a reward. That layering reaches its most concentrated form in the episode Dreamscaperers, where Bill is finally formally introduced. The episode begins with a dream sequence in Stan's mind, which Gideon, the child psychic villain, has paid Bill to invade. The dream sequence is staged with a kind of gray-black palette, distinct from the bright colors of the show's ordinary register. Bill, when he appears, is yellow, bright, almost incandescent in the otherwise muted scene. The contrast is the point. He arrives as a splash of color in a landscape that has been desaturated specifically to make him stand out. The first thing he does in his first scene is hover. The second thing he does is greet the children by names they have never given him. The third thing he does is laugh. The laugh, as already mentioned, is one of the most distinctive sounds in the show, a high-pitched, drawn-out cackle that does not quite resolve into anything human. The voice actor has spoken about the difficulty of producing it. The episode lets the laugh play out for a long time, longer than is comfortable for the audience, so that you understand, in the first few seconds of meeting him, that this is a creature who is enjoying himself at your expense and does not particularly care that you notice. The introduction is a model of how to make a villain feel inevitable from the first moment. The episode that follows, in plot terms, is straightforward enough. The children, with Soos's help, navigate Stan's mindscape, encounter various comic representations of Stan's memories, and eventually trick Bill out of the dream. The mechanism by which they trick him is, in retrospect, important. They do not defeat him in any meaningful sense. They simply create enough disruption that he loses interest. He decides, on his own, to leave the dream rather than continue dealing with the children. He warns them, on his way out, that he will be watching. The episode ends with the family safe, but with the threat of Bill formally introduced. He is now, in essence, a permanent presence in the show's universe. The viewer, in this moment, understands that he can be summoned again, that he has not been banished, that he will return when the writers want him to. The show, having spent 19 episodes preparing the audience for him, has now welcomed him into the regular cast. In the back half of the first season and into the second season, Bill appears in flickers. He is mentioned, sometimes, in Ford's journal entries as the children read them aloud. He is glimpsed, sometimes, in dream sequences. He is suggested, in coded credits, by the symbols that appear in the end credit cipher. He is, in short, a presence rather than a participant. The show keeps him in reserve. When he does appear, it is for short stretches, almost always memorable, almost always escalating in their menace. The episode Sock Opera, in the front half of the second season, is the one that pushes his role from threat to active participant. The episode is built around Dipper's growing frustration with his inability to crack the password on Ford's old laptop, a password that he believes will unlock secrets about the journals. Bill, sensing the frustration, makes his offer. Dipper, exhausted, accepts. The deal is the use of his body for, in Bill's wording, just a moment. The handshake is performed, the blue flame lights, and Bill steps into Dipper's body the way a person steps into a car. What follows is, in the show's universe, one of the most uncomfortable extended sequences with Bill in it. He, in Dipper's body, walks around the mystery shack with the loose-limbed gait of someone trying out new limbs. He slams the body into walls to test what it can take. He slams the fingers in a drawer to see if they will bruise. He climbs to a high point and considers jumping off, mostly to find out what would happen. He treats the body as a rented suit, and the show, while playing this for comic timing, never lets you forget that the body is a child's. Mabel, who notices that something is wrong with her brother, gradually pieces together what has happened. The climax of the episode involves a chase through a school production of a sock puppet show that Mabel has been organizing, with Bill, in Dipper's body, attempting to destroy the journal that Mabel has been holding. Mabel, in a moment of genuine quick thinking, traps Bill in a position where he has no choice but to leave Dipper's body in order to escape. Dipper returns, in possession of himself again, badly bruised. The bruises are real. The show holds on them for a moment, just long enough for you to understand what they mean. Dipper has been hurt, in his own body, by something that wore his body to hurt him. The implications are not subtle. The show, in this moment, has shown you exactly what kind of creature Bill is willing to be when nobody is watching. He is, in this episode, allowed to be properly horrible. The cartoon timing does not save him from the truth of what he has just done. The episode, in its closing minutes, lets Dipper sit alone for a beat. He does not say much. He does not need to. The image does the work. The second season's middle stretch builds on this with a series of appearances that show Bill operating in the background of multiple plot lines. He whispers in dreams. He leaves graffiti on the inside of certain rooms. He shows up, briefly, on the corner of certain frames, in patterns that fans have spent years cataloging. The cumulative effect of these small appearances is to make the viewer feel that Bill is gathering. He is, in essence, getting ready. The show is teaching the viewer to feel the slow accumulation of his presence. By the time you reach the final stretch of the second season, when the rift is openly cracking and the color of the sky is starting to bleed, the feeling of inevitability is overwhelming. You knew this was coming. You did not know how it would arrive. The fact that it arrives in the form of the Pines family making a series of small but consequential mistakes, including Mabel's heartbroken handing over of the rift to a person she trusts, is what makes the apocalypse feel earned rather than imposed. Bill does not break in. He is invited again and again by people who do not realize what they are inviting. The episode A Tale of Two Stans, which I mentioned earlier, is in some ways the central piece of Bill's backstory in the show. It lays out the history of the brothers, the original Portal project, the original Betrayal. It also, in a single extended sequence, shows you Bill from Ford's perspective during the early years of their partnership. The Bill of those flashbacks is, on first viewing, identical to the Bill you have come to know, with the same voice and the same hat and the same eye. The difference, which the episode makes you feel without underlining, is in the way Ford listens to him. In the flashbacks, Ford listens to Bill with the open trust of someone who has finally found a collaborator who understands him. The trust is heartbreaking to watch, because you know what Bill is. The episode, by showing you the partnership at its peak, before the betrayal, lets you understand the depth of the wound the betrayal would later inflict. Ford was not just deceived, he was loved, or believed himself loved, by a creature who never loved anyone. That is the wound the show keeps coming back to, and Bill is, in every appearance, a fresh reminder of it. Ford, in the present, cannot bear to look at him for long. The show stages their encounters in the second half of the season with care. Ford is always a little stiff in his posture. He is always a little quick to look away. The body of an old man trying not to fall back into a relationship that has ruined him is one of the more delicately animated things in any children's show of its era. The events of Weirdmageddon, when they come, push Ford to a kind of confrontation he has been avoiding for decades. He has to look at Bill again. He has to speak to him. He has to bargain with him. The fact that he eventually engineers the trick that ends Bill is, in this reading, a kind of psychic recovery as well as a tactical victory. He has reclaimed the relationship. He has flipped it. He has been the one to set the terms, finally, of the goodbye. The show, in giving him this opportunity, gives him a closure that survivors of certain real-life relationships often never get. He does not just survive Bill, he defeats him on terms of his own choosing. Stan, in the same moment, is functioning as the muscle of that recovery, the brother who is willing to make the actual sacrifice so that Ford can finally have the moment he has been deprived of for 40 years. The two of them, together, complete a process that has been waiting 4 decades to be completed. The show does not labor over this implication. It simply lets the scene be what it is. The implications hum underneath. You feel them, even when the dialogue is light. The aftermath of that scene, as I have mentioned, is the long, slow restoration of Stan's mind, which the show treats with extraordinary tenderness. The show does not pretend that the restoration is complete. There are scenes in the closing montage in which Stan is clearly still missing pieces, in which his memory is patchy, in which he sometimes confuses one detail for another. The show is honest about the cost. The defeat of Bill is not free. Stan will not be exactly the man he was. He will be, instead, a slightly different man, walking around in the world with a slightly different history, slowly recovering some of what he lost over the years that follow. The Pines family's adventure together, after the events of the show, is implied to involve some ongoing care for what Stan has lost. The brothers, in their final scenes, leave Gravity Falls on a boat, intending to chart the world's anomalies. The implication is that part of the long sea voyage is also, quietly, a kind of rehabilitation, a way of giving Stan time to reconstruct his life with his brother at his side. The show is, again, refusing to insist on a clean victory. It insists, instead, on a survivable one. The two brothers, together at last, sailing into a future that has not been ruined, but has also not been entirely repaired, is the kind of ending that does not flatter the audience by promising too much. Returning to the question of how Bill's lore has continued to evolve after the show's end, it is worth noting how much of the post-finale material has been concerned not with Bill's resurrection, but with the slow filling in of the spaces between his on-screen appearances. The expanded materials, including the journals, the in-universe books, the shorts, and the 2024 book in Bill's voice, all add detail to what he was doing in the time before and after his on-screen presence. They do not, for the most part, suggest that he is back. They simply suggest that he was always larger than the show had time to depict. The show, in this reading, has been functioning, after its end, as a kind of slow archaeological project. New layers are being added to the strata of Bill's history. The depth of his backstory continues to grow. The actual present-tense story of him remains, mostly, frozen at the moment of his death. The fans, in their decoding of the new materials, continue to find small puzzles tucked into corners. The community has kept the show alive, in a real sense, by refusing to treat Bill's death as the end of his available material. There has always been more to find. The production team has continued to provide more to find. The cycle has, by now, been going for the better part of a decade. There is, in considering all of this, a particular pleasure in the fact that Bill has been the engine of so much continued creative engagement. He is, in essence, the show's permanent invitation to keep thinking. He is the puzzle that never quite resolves. He is the character who could, in theory, still come back, in some form, in some future continuation, in some shape we cannot yet predict. The fact that this possibility remains open is part of why the show has stayed alive in the way it has. Most animated series, once they end fully. Their fans move on. Their characters become memorable but stable images, fixed at the moment of the final episode. Gravity Falls has, by contrast, refused to become stable. Bill, in particular, has refused. The statue in the forest, the encoded prayer, the post-show books, the 2024 return of his voice, the social media interventions by the creator, all conspire to keep him in a state of soft suspension. He is not present. He is also not gone. He is, in this state, ideal for the kind of long, obsessive engagement that fans have always given the show. He gives them something to argue about. He gives them something to decode. He gives them something to anticipate, even when the anticipation never resolves into a new season. The show has, through Bill, achieved a kind of permanent afterlife, and the afterlife has been as creatively productive as the original run. It is worth, at this stage, sitting with the smaller details, the ones that do not necessarily fit into a single chapter, but which thicken the texture of who Bill is. He has, scattered across the show, a series of small habits that fans have cataloged obsessively, and the catalog is part of how his character feels real. He has a particular tick when amused, a small bobbing motion of his hat, as if the body is laughing in a way the eye does not quite show. He has a habit, when delivering bad news, of momentarily turning red, the color of his entire form flushing in a single beat before returning to yellow. He has a habit of forming his stick limbs into ridiculous shapes, sometimes pointing in impossible directions, sometimes producing extra limbs when convenient, sometimes splitting one limb into many for a specific gesture. He has a habit of speaking to objects, briefly addressing furniture or stones or the ground as if they have feelings, in a way that the show implies is partly satirical and partly genuinely sincere, in that, to him, a stone is no less a being than a human, both being slightly tedious arrangements of matter. He has a habit of producing small physical objects from inside his triangular form, including hats, weapons, cups of coffee, snacks, and at one point, a guest, all of which appear from somewhere inside him and vanish when he is done with them. He is, in this way, less a character with a body than a character with a portable pocket dimension. The show also gives him, in scattered moments, small physical gestures of affection that are unsettling precisely because of how casually they appear. He pats people on the head. He shakes hands. He occasionally puts an arm around a shoulder. He delivers these gestures without removing the menace from his manner. He is, in essence, performing friendliness as a costume, and the costume is always slightly the wrong size. The pat on the head, when he gives one, is the kind of pat a person might give a dog they are about to put to sleep. The arm around the shoulder is the kind of arm a man might put on a customer he is just convinced to sign a contract he will regret. The handshake is, of course, the most dangerous gesture in the show, because the handshake, sealed with blue flame, is the formal commitment of a deal. The show, in giving him this physical vocabulary of false warmth, makes him feel like a particular kind of person you may have met in real life. He is the salesman who calls you by your first name. He is the consultant who remembers what you ordered the last time. He is, in the most banal possible sense, a man with a clipboard and a smile, who wants you to sign something, who will, after you have signed it, never be available to take your calls again. The show's writers have, in various interviews, talked about the small joke buried in this presentation, which is that Bill is, on a meta level, the show itself in costume. The show is also asking the viewer to sign something. It is asking for the viewer's attention, for the viewer's time, for the viewer's investment in a long arcing mystery that the viewer cannot, on first viewing, fully see. The viewer signs by continuing to watch. The show, in return, keeps offering them small pieces of revelation, in the form of decoded ciphers. recurring symbols, deepening mythology. The relationship is, in essence, the same kind of relationship Bill has with his deal partners. The difference is that the show, as the artist behind the contract, does honor the deal. The viewer who keeps watching does get the payoff. The viewer who decodes the ciphers does get the secrets. The show is, in the cleanest possible sense, Bill done right. A contract that pays off. He is the dark mirror of his own series. The series is built on what he does, but it gives back instead of taking. That is, in the end, why the show is loved as much as it is. It performs the same magic Bill performs, but it performs it benevolently. If we are sitting with the lore in this much detail, it is worth also walking through the few moments in the show in which Bill expresses anything that could be called fear. They are rare. They are also, by design, very revealing. The first is a brief moment in the second season when one of the encoded credits messages, which Ford reads aloud, mentions an action that the show implies might harm Bill, and Bill, in a flash of his eye visible elsewhere in the same episode, briefly registers something that looks like attention. He has noticed, he is paying attention. The second is the failed attempt at the prophecy wheel, where, for one frame, before the circle breaks, Bill's body appears to shrink slightly. The shrinkage is not commented on by any character. The viewer is left to register it on their own. The implication is that, for a fraction of a second, the circle was working, and Bill, on some level, knew it. The third moment is the one already discussed, the moment of his erasure, when he tries to bargain in the language of the axolotl, and his voice climbs into a register the rest of the show has not used. These three moments are the only ones in the entire run in which Bill is shown as something less than fully confident. The rarity of them is the point. He is, otherwise, never afraid. He laughs at threats, he laughs at counteroffers, he laughs at attempts at reasoning. The three moments stand out because they are the only cracks in the certainty. They are the only times you see him from inside, where the puppet's costume briefly slips and the thing wearing it briefly looks alarmed. These cracks are part of why the ending of the show works. If Bill had been a creature of pure, cool indifference, his erasure would feel hollow. The audience would not feel that anything had been pierced. Because the show has, in those three small moments, allowed Bill to feel briefly threatened, the final erasure carries the weight of an actual victory. He was capable of being scared. He was scared, at the very end. He died scared. The show is, in this small touch, generous in the way it stages even his demise. He does not get the dignity of a quiet, accepting death. He gets the panic he would have inflicted on anyone else, briefly turned back on him. The Pines family, in defeating him, gives him the experience of being a victim of his own genre. That, in the show's careful sense of justice, is the most appropriate possible ending. There is, in the closing minutes of the finale, a particular detail that fans have spent years discussing, which is the way Bill's body, just before its full erasure, briefly takes on a different color. The yellow drains, the red flickers. Then, for a single frame, the form becomes a color that is neither yellow nor red, but something the show's palette has not used before. The color has been variously described as a deep amber, or a desaturated gold, or a kind of fading rust. Whatever it is, by the show's own design, not within Bill's normal palette. As far as fans have pieced together, this is meant to represent the color of the actual being underneath the costume, briefly visible at the moment the costume is destroyed. Whether this reading is correct is something the production has not formally confirmed. It is one more of the small, ambiguous, deeply considered visual choices that the show built into its ending. It is, in essence, a final fragment of new information delivered in the very last seconds of the character's existence, designed to keep the viewer thinking long after the screen has gone dark. The show, even in killing him, was still adding to him. What that addition contributes, on rewatch, is a sense that Bill, even in death, was never finished. The show has finished telling his story. He has not finished being him. The being underneath the costume, whatever it is, may not have been visible long enough for the audience to know what it was, but it was visible long enough for the audience to know that it existed. The implications, as has been laid out across this video, are large and deliberately unresolved. The viewer is left, at the end of the show, with the sense that the triangle they spent 2 seasons fearing was, in essence, an interface. A friendly face designed to make a much larger horror small enough to fit on a screen. The interface has been destroyed. The horror behind the interface has not been confirmed dead. The show, in choosing to end on this ambiguity, does the one thing a children's animation almost never does, which is to refuse to give a complete answer. The refusal is, in the show's clearest aesthetic, a gift. It treats the audience as capable of holding open questions. It treats them as capable of carrying a story home and continuing it themselves. Bill, in the final analysis, is the engine of that treatment. He is the character that requires the audience to keep thinking after the show is over. He is, in this sense, one of the most respectful villains ever written for a young audience. He insists that they keep using their minds. There is one more small consideration worth raising before we close, which is the way Bill's lore has been treated in the years since the 2024 book. The book opened, as I have described, several new questions about his survival, about his backstory, about the axolotl, about other dream demons. The show has not yet, at the time of this recording, formally returned. The creator has been clear that there is no current plan for a full third season. The book has been positioned as a complete piece of expanded material, rather than as a teaser for further on-screen storytelling. And yet, the very existence of the book has changed the texture of the Bill conversation in ways that no other piece of post-show material has. The book is, in a sense, the largest individual piece of new Bill material to appear since the finale. It has, accordingly, become the central document around which post-show fan analysis has organized itself. There are now, in various places online, careful annotated reading guides for the book, decoded versions of its hidden ciphers, comprehensive lists of its claimed historical events. The book has, in essence, given the fan community a fresh corpus to work with, and the community has spent the months since its publication doing exactly the kind of slow, obsessive, close reading that they once did with the show itself. The result is that Bill, in the present moment, is in a kind of secondary renaissance. The book has reactivated him. Whether this reactivation will lead to anything more from the production team is, as of this recording, unconfirmed. There have been rumors, there have been hints, there have been small pieces of social media content from the creator that gesture in directions fans have read as suggestive. The official line, however, remains that the show is complete, and that the expanded material is supplementary rather than preparatory. Fans, predictably, do not entirely believe this. Fans are, in essence, in the same position with respect to Bill that the show always treated as the dangerous position. They are paying attention, they are looking for patterns, they are hoping. The hope is, in itself, a kind of contract they are signing, in the absence of a triangle to sign it with. They are betting on more. The future will show whether the bet pays off. For now, the present tense of Bill's lore is simply this. He is, by all available evidence, mostly dead. He is, by certain pieces of evidence, possibly not. The community continues to read. The production continues to release small pieces of material. The triangle continues to wait, in the forest, in the statue, in the back pages of a book that was never quite supposed to be his. There is one more thread worth pulling on before we close, which is the way Bill, as a character, fits into the larger history of animated villains. He is, in many ways, the heir to a long line of mascot-shaped monsters in animation, from the cheerful evil corporate icons of older cartoons to the deliberately childish villains of certain experimental animation projects of the late 20th century. He shares, with those predecessors, the principle that horror can be made worse by giving it a friendly shape. He differs from them in the consistency with which the show commits to that contrast. There are villains in animation history who were designed to look friendly and turned out to be evil. There are villains who were designed to look evil and stayed evil. Bill is one of the few villains in animation history who is designed to look friendly, who is in fact deeply malevolent, and who is allowed, over the course of his run, to be both at full intensity without softening either side of the contradiction. He is funny and he is monstrous. The show insists on both. By refusing to resolve the contradiction, the show gives him a unique place in the gallery of animated antagonists. He is, in essence, an experiment in tonal commitment, and the experiment, as a piece of artistic engineering, succeeded. He has also, in the years since the show ended, become a kind of reference point for younger creators in animation. When discussing how to construct a villain who is genuinely menacing, but also genuinely funny, the example of Bill is one that often comes up. The combination of design elements that he uses, the cartoon body, the cosmic vocabulary, the casual cruelty, the dry humor, has been imitated, to varying degrees, by villains in subsequent animated projects. The imitations rarely match the original, partly because the show that built him, also did the patient work of seeding his presence across 2 seasons before letting him fully arrive. Most subsequent attempts at this kind of villain skip the patient seeding and try to introduce the character with full force from the start. The result, in most cases, is a villain who feels constructed rather than inevitable. Bill is one of the rare animated villains who feels inevitable. The show, by hiding him in plain sight for 19 episodes, made him feel as if he had always been there, and the feeling never fully went away. Other shows attempting the same trick have had to learn, the hard way, that the trick requires unusual patience. It is also worth, before closing, mentioning the small details that the show buried in the very final moments. The kind of details that you only find by going back through the finale frame by frame. There are several frames, in the moments leading up to Bill's erasure, that contain images the show did not call attention to in dialogue. One of these frames shows Bill in the middle of his panic, with a fragmented version of his form, as if the animation itself is breaking apart. Inside the fragments, fans have argued, are tiny images of other shapes, other faces, other dimensions. The fragments are too small, at normal playback speed, to be read clearly. Slowed down, they have been examined endlessly. Various interpretations have been proposed. None has been officially confirmed. What is clear is that the show, in its final seconds with him, packed the visuals with more information than a single viewing could possibly process. The intention was, by all available evidence, to give the audience material to find for years afterwards. That intention has been spectacularly fulfilled. The frames are still being analyzed, almost a decade after broadcast, and the analyses still produce new readings. He is, in this small technical sense, one of the most densely encoded character endings in modern animation. His death is also a puzzle. The puzzle, taken in totality, is part of what makes him linger. You watch Gravity Falls, on first run through, and you experience Bill as a story. You return, later, and you experience him as a riddle. The riddle does not fully solve. The official material continues to add to the riddle, in small pieces, every few years. The fan community continues to add to the riddle, in much larger pieces, almost daily. The result is a character who has, in cultural terms, refused to come to rest. He is in motion. He continues to be revised, reread, reinterpreted, in real time, by an audience that is itself growing up and changing along with him. The show, in this peculiar way, has remained alive long after its broadcast ended, and the engine of that life has been, in large part, the unfinished business of one yellow triangle. In the end, the simplest description of Bill, if you had to give one, might be that he is the show's argument that not every story needs to be told all the way through to be told well. The show told as much of him as it needed to. The rest of him, the parts the show could not reach, are still out there, in the corners of the journals, in the pages of the post-show book, in the hidden frames of the final episode, in the encoded credits, in the statue in the forest. He is, in this state, more present than he could ever have been if the show had insisted on giving him a full and final ending. He has been deliberately left, in a sense, slightly larger than the screen could hold. That is, in many ways, the most respectful thing the show could have done with him. It has refused to flatten him. It has refused to wrap him up. It has left him in the half-open state that real cosmic horror requires. He is, in essence, the only kind of being he could have been. He is a partial answer. He is a continuing question. He is, in the most precise sense, exactly the character he was always meant to be. If you came to this video to fall asleep, the format suits you. There is something appropriate about thinking about Bill while drifting off, because of course, the place where he lives, in the show, is the place between waking and sleeping. He is the figure who shows up when the mind is unguarded. He is the voice in the dream that promises everything if you will just sign here. The show, in this sense, was always a slightly nervous thing to think about as you fell asleep, because it kept reminding you that the part of you that was about to be most open was the part of you that he was always trying to reach. Sleep well anyway. The show has spent 40 episodes arguing that the family that loves you is, in the end, stronger than the triangle that does not. That argument is, by the show's own evidence, mostly correct. He is mostly gone. The world is mostly fine. The summer of Gravity Falls, in the long story of the Pines family, is in the past. The town is rebuilding. The brothers are sailing. The twins are growing up. The triangle is, by all available evidence, a statue in a forest. waiting for a hand that, if the show has taught us anything, you would do well not to offer. Gravity Falls, in its 40-episode run, became one of the most beloved animated series of the 2010s, and it did so by being unusually serious about what an animated series could carry. It carried mystery, and it carried grief, and it carried the slow, specific shape of a summer ending. Bill Cipher, the triangular dream demon at the center of its second half, became, in those 40 episodes, one of the most enduring villains in modern animation, and he continues, through the expanded material and the post-show life of the franchise, to be one of the few villains whose stories are still being added to, almost a decade after his apparent death. He is, in many ways, the engine of the show's afterlife. He is, also, the figure who lets the show end without ending. He is the half-finished thought that keeps the audience returning. He is, in the simplest terms, the kind of character a show only gets to make once, in a particular alignment of writers and designers and voice actors and timing. And the show that made him knew, by the end, that it had made something it would not be able to make again. The decision to let him go, in the way it did, was not just a creative choice. It was a kind of respect. The show, in choosing to end, gave him the gift of permanence. He cannot be ruined by a sequel that does not honor him. He cannot be flattened by a return that does not understand him. He is fixed, in the position the show left him in, at the moment of his most ambiguous defeat, and from that fixed position, he continues to send small